services you're offering. And depending on
they're more critical than
more sovereignty. All the way that, some companies, they're filling up their own diesel tanks to have auxiliary power because they don't even trust, or they even think about what happens if the power supply doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, but this whole topic then with sovereignty, I think step one, nuanced, and then basically strategies fit for the criticality is an obvious topic. The other key topic, I think, is how we need to have plan A continue as we have gone, and then have serious contingency planning. Because sometimes also I see that, the starting point of the conversation is like talking to around sovereignty with the high IT leaders in different types of industries, how different we are viewing the topic. But I think the interesting topic, or the interesting follow-on question I would like to ask you is like, how many of them, when you're discussing this, are consciously going for plan A, plan B strategy, or are they just pursuing whatever strategy they have?
My impression is that, I think all the companies have some kind of strategy. Mm-hmm. How do they consume or create IT services going forward? Mm-hmm. And some have a very radical strategy that they want to move everything to the cloud, and others say, well, some things we want to keep here. Yeah. And what I think is happening now is that the ones that were pretty aggressively said we're going to move everything there, they have a pretty hard time now because they didn't make this differentiation that I was talking about before.
But it's also, I think everyone wants to reduce the dependency to the top cloud providers in the US, but it comes at a certain cost as well. Of course, they are better than anyone in providing the best services and the best quality and the best security, etc. How do you consider that kind of gap to be?
And that's why, to be honest, I don't agree to the statement that everybody wants to decrease the dependency.
Right.
I think a lot of companies don't have this big problem because they understand that from a cost perspective, from a functionality perspective, that all the alternatives in doing it yourself or hosting it closer to your heart or even in Europe, they have some advantages, but on the other hand, the disadvantages are so much higher that it's
not a feasible option.
It's not really feasible. No? And that's why they're rather, and this is why you come, of course, to this risk approach. What kind of risk do you have on the table? Was it only the risk that somebody pulls the kill switch, or is it also the risk that your services are not up to date anymore and that you're not able to handle your customers going forward? So and this, coming back to the differentiation, where you also have to explain that risk is not only continuity or sovereignty, and then having
one risk vector.
It's one of the vectors. Yeah.
And I had a short anecdote that really maybe makes it easy to understand the fancy words we're talking when we say differentiation. So I was heading up the data platform and understanding for how we go to cloud with data in Vattenfall, some years back. And we had requirements coming in from different angles. And of course, then we had requirements from nuclear. And of course, we had different security zones where the deepest security zone is terminal server, i.e. not connected to anything. And then basically the discussion when it's bipolar is like we need to be able to manage all security concerns. So all of a sudden now we are pushing the nuclear agenda to do something for all of Vattenfall. And then I basically, okay, that's going to be quite costly, right? So how many people are we talking about in nuclear that we want to serve with this, that is critical? And then what became sort of millions and billions in terms of the strategic architecture for Vattenfall boiled down to 25, 30 people. And I think I can do a sidecar strategy for these guys that are even more safe. And this is the differentiating stuff
exactly.
In a nutshell, right?
But what's your view on this sovereign topic? Do you think different companies acting very differently, or do you think that's a very common approach?
I think a lot of people take it in a very subjective way and a political way rather than objective way.
Yes.
And I agree with what you're saying there. They need to look at the whole picture. What is really the consequences if you do reduce the functionality that they do provide. I don't think people understand the level of quality that the top cloud providers do provide, and what the consequences would be of moving away from them. I mean, even when working at Spotify, you know, we first went to the cloud, then went on-prem. Then we realized, you know, doing all of this on-prem takes away so much of the core, you know, functionality that we want to provide. And we need to focus on what the core, you know, USB and the functionality should be for our company. And we can't operate the hard drives. We can't even operate the Kubernetes engines properly. We can't even operate, you know, all the other services that do provide today that are, you know, fundamental in some sense. So if we instead can focus on the top core functionality and let the cloud providers, especially the software functionality they do provide, and they do have a functionality that is so much better than others, then we can accelerate much further. And especially if you go to AI and the quality that they have in their kind of AI and data services, if you wouldn't have that, we couldn't gain as much value as we otherwise could, I would argue.
But and I concur. Well, like it's even boring because it's not in
too much.
I agree, but let me add a nuance to what he's saying, which is we are also agreeing with, but which is a different angle into the topic. So let's talk about sovereign AI, not sovereign cloud, but sovereign AI. So that sounds great on principle level, and it means, we need to go out and we need to create a sovereign AI. So to say that is also a very, very nuanced question in terms of what is it that we really need to do to get sort of a language model, a foundation model. This is culturally correct for Sweden or whatever. And here now, once again, if you're bipolar, you say, we need to be world-class in building our own super large-scale foundation models. So we need to start the sovereignty from the lowest ground. And then if you look deeper into the technology stack and the effort and how you can get to sovereignty that is meaningful with the least cost, then maybe, do we really need to invent, if you talk about sovereignty, the whole thing, you are really talking about a foundry for chips. No, exactly. So that's off the table. Okay, yeah. What's the next level? Okay, do we, so how can we then understand how we can maybe use even American large language models, and then we start from that base in order to fine-tune or distill out the models we need in a sovereign way for ourselves. So all of a sudden now we have taken the whole stack and compressed it to the core strategic pieces of the puzzle where we think sovereignty is key. For instance, culturally sounding advice in terms of whatever we want to, how we want an LLM to work, or how we want it to work in banking or whatever. So this whole sovereignty thing, if I take it down to enterprise level and banking, of course, maybe you shouldn't start from scratch, but you should maybe do it something, and then you need to distill it somewhere, and then you need to do it, So that whole, the main word that you put on the table is differentiated or nuanced understanding for the problem, to solving the right problem. Does that...
Exactly, and also for your operations, of course. Yeah, I mean, of course, if you use, I mean, you have to keep your business running, and the more regulated you are, the more you're under pressure, and you have to prove that you can keep your business running. And in the old days, you said the more control I have over this stack. If I have the people in my own building, I know who I have to call if something goes wrong. That, of course, gives me some
control
over
maybe
it, and
secure safety.
At least, and this is, and that's why I think it comes here, like we said before, the difference between facts and feelings, of course, also come in, and I mean, having how much control do you have over your people sitting here in Sweden?
None. But you said you were leading in also saying, like, it's interesting how it doesn't feel like this is a data-driven decision right now. And what you meant with that, if I extrapolate, is really the definition, the facts are out there, and still people in the same industry with the same regulations and risk around them, in the same market with the same innovation pressure, acts very differently on the same, or answers very differently.
So it's more like, I would say it's not fact-driven. Instead of it's data-driven, it's not fact-driven. It's based on some bias, some political ideas, some aspirations.
Or it's based on what you happen to have as knowledge at the point in time in that particular unit that is working on this.
Yeah, but I think it's also based on what do you believe will happen going forward. And this is where I think the old way of creating strategy or building strategy is not the only way, or just collecting data and facts and try that you can take the right decision based on the facts that you have on the table. It doesn't work anymore. You have to create some scenarios because there's such a high uncertainty. I mean, I guess you've seen all these uncertainty indices. I think we have 5 times more uncertainty right now than we had during COVID. So in this uncertainty, how do you think you can make decisions only based on the facts of today, without having a common understanding how the future will look like?
Not easy, and a rabbit hole in itself. I added this as a topic as well. Perhaps we can get back to this
awesome
topic about becoming sovereign in the world of today, and the need for it or not need for it.
Good.
That would be super fun to have. But before that, very welcome here, Stephan Erne. Is that the proper name?
Stephan Erne, what people
German.
call me in Germany.
It's a Düsseldorf name. You're from Düsseldorf.
I'm from Düsseldorf, yeah, where they usually speak very, very clear German, I would say.
Is that Hochgerman?
Hochdeutsch, genau.
Hochdeutsch,
Yes.
ja, genau, ja.
Nice. Well, former CDO or Chief Digital Officer at Handelsbanken as well, and also a prominent advocate, I think, for a number of technology techniques, which I'm really much looking forward to.
Yeah, and he was the moderator at the CIO Nordics just this week we concluded. Yes,
exactly.
so those kind of gigs as well.
But not only speaking about AI perhaps tonight, also perhaps looking forward to speaking about quantum computing perhaps, and even the cloud and other topics. That would be super, super fun. But before that, perhaps you can give a quick introduction about really who is Stephan Erne?
Stephan. Yeah.
You need to work on your German pronunciation. Stephan.
Yes, please.
Yeah, sure. Feel free to stop me or to ask more. Well, I'm a German engineer, you could say that. So I'm from Düsseldorf, and I studied in Aachen.
Been to Aachen with Ericsson. Yeah.
But then I realized that maybe I should get some international experience. So I was actually writing my master's thesis here in Stockholm at KTH.
Nice.
95. So
Nice connection.
I came here for a half a year, and somehow my ambition, even that I studied a very technical, and I want to be, and I would say I love technical problem solving. So I would really say I'm an engineer, and I guess most of my family and friends would agree. But I always wanted to move somehow over to the business side, because I realized that if you really want to create an impact with that, it's not enough to be a cool techie guy. You have to somehow bridge the gap and take the business side with you.
Technology needs to be adopted. It needs to be used.
Yeah, so that's why actually I wanted to, and I had the possibility to make a PhD here as well. But I wanted to take a trainee program, because my idea was this is the fastest path into the business world. So I actually found a trainee program. And I was open to do this in Sweden, but my Swedish was so bad, so nobody wanted me. And then I met my wife here as well, so I convinced her to move back to Germany. So we were living in Germany for 9 years, and I started a trainee program at Deutsche Telekom.
Deutsche Telekom.
Deutsche Telekom, which by that time was, the incumbent, old ministry, 350,000 people, really old-fashioned company. But was on the way of getting privatized, making an IPO.
Which years are this? I'm trying to think. We have the Rainer Deutschmann here, who was the group's COO of Telia, but I think he has a Deutsche Telekom background maybe as well.
Could be, yes.
No one you know.
No,
I was just thinking if there's a connection here.
There's not.
No. Sorry.
And that was 96.
96,
then,
yeah, it's a long time ago.
It's quite a while ago. So I was there doing the trainee program. And then everybody told us you have to understand the customers. So from this trainee program, I actually moved over to a B2B sales. So I became actually account manager for Deutscher Bundestag, like Riksdag, and then some of the big ministries. And Berlin. It was pretty interesting being like 27 and then becoming account manager for this big ministry. And this was also during the time when the not the headquarters, what to say, everything was moving to Berlin, the capital. The capital moved from Bonn, where Deutsche Telekom, everything was like in the 5 kilometer radius, the whole government, everything, Deutsche Telekom, Deutsche Post was also there, and then the government moved to Berlin, and then the question was, how should they work together between Bonn and Berlin? There was a Datenhighway, there was a the
Datenhighway.
Exactly, Datenhighway between Bonn and Berlin. So that they could collaborate, but I mean the only thing they did was sending faxes to each other, so it was not so advanced technology by that time.
The Datenhighway, we should look at it in the era of 90s.
But of course really fun. And then I actually I became the assistant to the CEO of Deutsche Telekom, which was extremely interesting because I mean this was a huge change in the whole industry and the company. T-Mobile was created as a subsidiary to build up the mobile network. T-Online for the online network. It was the time when VoiceStream was bought, which then became T-Mobile US. And they also bought the IT subsidiary of Daimler Chrysler, which was called DB Systemhaus, like 30,000 IT people.
The IT organization of Mercedes, like we have Volvo IT in Volvo, which is a business subsidiary.
And it was even when Daimler and Chrysler were together. So it was the IT subsidiary, 30,000 people doing IT. And that was bought from Deutsche Telekom to create T-Systems, what is now T-Systems, and EADS as well. Which overnight became like one of the biggest IT or ICT players in Europe because you had so much captive business.
Exciting times.
That was really fun, and then I actually also moved over from being the assistant to the CEO to T-Systems and started building up this company. And there were like 4 different divisions from Deutsche Telekom moved in there. There was this telco, the IT people coming together. So it was really interesting to see
the ICT convergence.
Exactly, it was really the big bet on ICT convergence. With a huge captive business, because I mean all companies in Germany were of course customers of Deutsche Telekom because there was no alternative. And the idea was of course to provide IT services to them now as well, instead of only a telecom service. So it was a big ambition, a very strategic move. But then, of course, things happened like RDSL. So it was very bumpy ride, I would say. Even if it was strategically a good idea, but it was not that easy, and it's still ups and downs.
And also in the 90s and 2000, there was so many. There was much less standardization on protocols. I mean, like you can go back, and even now we have LTE as the main protocol in radio. But if you go back to that era, it is so many things that is coming from different. So when you're converging communication and IT, and this is immature at this point in time.
And the internet world was coming up, and then you had things like WhatsApp popping up. I think during 1 year, all the telecom companies lost $13 billion of revenue because people stopped sending SMS.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, there was a huge shift in the industry, and
people, if you haven't been in telco and understand the average revenue per user style and how it works, the whole era around the end of the 90s and the .com bubble, it has so many different applications here, and behind it all, the telco sits there and they're looking at their business model from one day to another, changing.
But still having the customers, of course. So but then once again, WhatsApp popping up, and the IP business. I mean, the whole IP revolution and so on. So it was really really cool.
And then
I moved to Ericsson.
Yeah, right.
Because then we moved also the family up here in Sweden. And then
so Ericsson was your ticket into Sweden, back to Sweden. So
exactly. Yes. Actually, I would say my wife was the ticket into Sweden.
Yeah.
Business
what did you do in Ericsson?
I joined the sales and marketing organization and was promoting mobile broadband. That was some of the first things, because it was when all the countries were giving out the 3G licenses and trying to convince mobile operators to invest into this new technology, but also especially change their business model from getting paid per minute to move over to the data packages, which was not that easy. So we were actually traveling around the whole world trying to explain the different business models and creating the market for mobile broadband.
Yeah.
That was when all these cool stickers were created for mobile broadband, which nowadays people wonder what was that. But it was a big move from a consumer side, because there were no devices. There was when the iPhone popped up and stuff like that. There was no real push from the consumer side. There was not really no way to make money out of it, but still they should invest into mobile broadband technology.
So which part of Ericsson is this? I have friends that work in the Ericsson enterprise at the time and stuff like that. So is this B2C or B2B or the whole, or more for operators?
More, yeah, it was towards operators. So there was a group function, was called Group Function Sales and Marketing.
Yeah.
Probably still exists, and this was like the support to all the countries in helping them convincing their operators to invest into mobile broadband technology.
Yeah, so to really shift the product category.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's why we also created something called category marketing, because we realized it's not a product you sell, you have to create a category for mobile broadband. And that's when we created this category marketing, had some stories, examples from different countries. So it was extremely international, really cool. And also interesting to see, of course, how this company Ericsson works. And then I moved over to something called the Network Society. I don't know if people usually at Ericsson remember that, because there was the idea to explain how actually after this infrastructure was in place, how does digitalization change different industries? So we are looking intensively into all kinds of industries.
So this is the evangelism arm of Ericsson, where they're having all their core, radio networks, all that. And something new is happening, but we need to start evangelizing with the customer to understand you can't look at what we are doing from your old lens. You need to start understanding the scenarios of the new lens.
Yeah. And this was then part of this, I think it was brand marketing. The official title was part of brand marketing. This is evangelism. And we had business cards with the name Network Society Evangelist. Yeah, so traveling around and explaining. And that was not only operators, then it also moved into industries. So we would talk to mining companies, because to healthcare, whatever.
In order for them to connect and make that story into their comfort zone, what does it mean for mining?
And then you moved into Handelsbanken somehow. How did you first get into Handelsbanken?
Because after I did this evangelism for a couple of years, I realized now actually I want to be part of it, and I want to drive this transformation in the company. So I was looking for these, and that was the time when these chief digital officer roles popped up, because companies realized, well, we have to do something, but we don't know what and how. And then they took in, and then Handelsbank actually also they wanted somebody from the outside. So they want somebody who has been through this change before, this transformation. So they looked for somebody, and I think and I think that also was cool, because when I then joined the banking industry, it felt a little like time travel 10, 20 years back.
Yeah.
Compared to the telco industry. So I think I really could take a lot of the learnings and experiences from the telco industry into banking, and really drive the transformation agenda then there at Handelsbanken, where I've been there, for 9 years, 8-9 years, the last 8-9 years.
Awesome. And I'd love to hear more about the work at Handelsbanken as well, and the banking sector in general, perhaps. So that would be super fun. But you also left there recently, and what's your main focus today?
Well, my focus is, to be honest, still the focus that I would probably say I had all my life. I want to drive this change. I really call it like technology-driven business transformation. And because what I think happened during the past years, there comes a new technology, can be mobile, can be internet, can be AI now, and then there's a big fuss about the technology, but at the end of the day, it creates some change on the business side, business transformation. And you have to adopt your processes, you have to change your go-to-market, you maybe create totally new businesses, you can do a lot of optimization. And what I really like is being in between those two worlds. Because if you really want to create an impact and want to have a positive impact on your customers, on your employees, on your business model, or you have to make sure that this technology is not just popped in and invested, you have to change a lot on the business side, and that's why I call this technology-driven business transformation.
Perhaps that's a great segue into the first topic here. Really, what is the problem with doing a proper business transformation, and especially if it comes to AI, of course, it's moving so fast from a technological point of view, but adoption, of course, is lagging behind them.
Yeah.
So perhaps you can elaborate a bit more. What's your view, and perhaps base it a bit on Handelsbanken and what kind of challenges and opportunities you saw there to still, to find opportunities from the tech coming.
Yeah. And I mean, if we look at the banking sector, as I'm coming from that angle, I think you have to understand what are the driving forces and how does it really work and what makes people awake or sleep at night or not. And if you're in a business that has been extremely successful for the last 100 years, it's like an oligopoly. Everybody's making tenth of millions or billions of EBIT every year. You have some kind of a pretty good competition. Your customers are happy with the digital services. They're not running away. You have a lot of regulations. I mean, usually I would say banks they're spending 80% of their IT budget on keep the lights on and keeping up with the regulations. So you have a machinery that is obviously working very well. So I mean, there are not a lot of outages. If something happens, you really are on the first page of every newspaper. You get some fines from the Finanzinspektionen. So that creates, of course, some kind of culture where play not to lose is probably the name of the game.
And this is nothing. We should not shy away from that fact, but we need to navigate that fact.
So and that's why I'm not saying it to blame it, but I think like you said,
you need to know
you
your
have
driving
to be aware
forces.
of that.
You need to play the game in the arena you're in.
And once again, I mean the alternative that you have like 100 different cool banks who are popping up like crazy and they're taking your money and you cannot find it anymore.
Is that better? No.
So it's not, So I mean, from a society perspective, it's of course, it's not that bad. You have some stable players which create this playing level field. And I would say still, then compared to other countries, of course, you could say, I mean, the Swedish banking market is maybe not the most innovative, but mobile bank ID, Swish and stuff like that. Other countries, they don't understand how that works.
Now, Swish is one of those things which is amazing to most foreigners.
So, but I would say especially bank ID.
Yeah, bank ID as well.
Yeah, that you can log in, that everybody knows who you are. You can log into any kind of service. In Germany, it's a mess. There are different solutions.
We should realize this.
So, and this is something they also have to acknowledge because, I mean, the banks agreed on creating this infrastructure and then all the innovation that was possible on top, not only for the banks today, but for everybody.
Everybody who's using BankID.
So I would say sometimes the banks don't get enough credit for what kind of infrastructure for digitalization they have created.
Yeah, good point.
I mean, interesting. And still, if you think about doing the business transformation as you want to do based on the tech as well, how did you go about that when you started, for a long while back now in Handelsbanken to actually do find value from tech? Can you just go through perhaps, how did you go about that and what were the main challenges perhaps?
And I would say that the good, I really, and I loved my time at Handelsbanken really. It was definitely the best time of my working life I had. And I think one of the reasons was that when I joined the bank, everybody knew that we have to change.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to convince people that, hello, wake up, something is happening there. It was everybody, almost everybody, I would say, realized, shit, things are happening out there. We have to do something.
What was the main kind of tech change you wanted to do at that time? Was it more the internet, the mobile, the cloud? What were the main? And
that's interesting question because by that, when I joined Handelsbanken, 98% of all customer interactions were in digital channels.
Really?
Already?
98%, but nobody knew it. Everybody still thought all the business is done in the branches.
Yeah.
And to be honest, the real business is, of course, still done in the branches. So it's not that you're making a lot of new business in the digital channels, but customers experience your services 98% of times in the digital channels. So that was one of the first things I was popping up, and so I told people, it's not that we're totally behind. It's not that customers don't appreciate it. And these SKI, Svensk Kvalitetsindex surveys, Handelsbanken also popped up as the best digital services. So Handelsbanken app had the highest ranking in those services.
But I think what is interesting is that people were thinking about, okay, all the contracts were signed in the branch, so they didn't realize that the whole customer journey was 98% digital, and there's just one moment physical. So just that.
Yeah, but to be honest, I think the word customer journey nobody heard at the bank before. So it was not a planned customer journey, to be honest. It was more like that was created for transactional stuff. Yeah,
so at this point in time, we didn't think about this in this way, but it simply just materialized in that way.
It just was like that, yeah. Because of course it was much better to let people pay their bills in the app than letting them come to the branches. Yeah. But it was, I wouldn't say that was a planned customer journey that started in one channel, and then you had a multi-channel approach and you were able to fulfill it somewhere else. It was more like, and that's what, once again, I think it was pretty astonished because I could not find a strategy behind it, but still it was in place.
Interesting.
It was just something that evolved from step choices.
But I think that the main driver, coming back to your question, how do you drive this now, was that I think a lot of people, I wouldn't say they were afraid, but had a bad feeling about this branch-focused business model. How are we able to survive in the digital world? Right. And I think this was one of the main questions for a lot of people internally, who of course realized that a lot of things happen, but of course also for investors. So that was actually one of the first things I did. I was helping investor relations a lot to create a story and explain how this digitalization is strengthening Handelsbanken's business model and not disrupting or killing it.
And maybe there's a backstory here that you maybe should fill us in on this, because if you're in Sweden and know a little bit about the banking sector, Handelsbanken is a phenomenon, how they have driven something in a way strongly centralized in terms of some of the tech and stuff like that, but then with an extreme empowered autonomy in terms of being the office of a regional place, which has they've been written books about this topic. So which is quite different to how the Nordeas or the Swedbanks or this SEBs work. So could you just give that, because what you're saying now, was the strength of this empowerment, this extreme empowerment. How can that work? And you did it so well. And all of a sudden now, what happens with that empowered office or regional, you call it branch manager, I guess, or
exactly.
But he was the boss. He was
the branch is the bank. That was one of the saying. The branch is the bank.
And this is something that is deeply ingrained in the Handelsbanken culture. And all of a sudden now, that core fundamental competitive advantage or philosophy, how the hell does that work in digital? And that, so this was my backstory to how big this topic is. Exactly. Did I get it right?
That's from exactly like you said. And the big word is, of course, decentralization.
Yeah.
Decentralization is one of the cornerstones of Handelsbanken, which means the branch manager is deciding. The branch manager should actually decide on everything. And I think there were a couple of CEOs who said the most important person in the branch is the branch in the company.
The way we build the company is through the branch manager.
And if you see, because Handelsbanken built up 200 offices in the UK during the last years. And the way they did it, they were looking for the right person. If they found
the CEO of the branch,
the right person, then they started the branch, and then this person was building it up. So in this decentralized model, and that's why, of course, the people who understood how the bank works, they even wanted even more. How does this then work in the decentralized in the digital world? And there were, because there was no strategy, at Handelsbanken there is no strategy department. And there was, when I joined, there was no strategy department, there was no marketing department, there was no segmentation model, because each branch manager segments its customer. It's called this church tower principle. You build a branch, and then what you see from the church tower, this is your area, and you know everybody, you know the people. It's very much built on personal relationship and knowing your customers, and then you decide how to handle your customers. And based on that, you have the total P&L for those people. You know how many people to hire. You know what kind of customers to take in.
You have the risk on your own.
There is not a lot of back office functions.
How do you start to digitalize them in that kind of company?
Yeah. And once again, the good thing is that everybody was somehow a little shaken about what will happen to us going forward. So I didn't have to convince them or to drag them into the discussion. They were more, they were really looking forward for somebody who's driving this discussion. And what I then did, and I had, let's put it like this. I think if you join a company like this, you have two choices. Either you go for a big hit and run, fast hit and run. You go in, you make a big fuss. Yeah. You're screaming. You're making everybody afraid. You come with some cool solutions, and then, and I've seen some of CDOs like this.
Yeah, in 3 years, 10 year max.
So yeah, after 1-2 years, you're out again, because people, of course, it's pretty nice. Some people think you're the hero, but usually you don't have a huge impact. So what I did instead is I was trying to build trust with as many people as possible.
Alliances.
So I was in the first year, I was one of the top 3 travelers in the company, because I was out there talking to anybody who wanted to talk to me. So I made some introduction, of course. We said this before. We created a new channel in the company talking about digital news.
Right? If we say that the most important person is a branch manager in this model, then you need to talk to every single branch manager in one way to have a feeling for where they are. Yeah. That's what
exactly.
you're talking about.
And there were, of course, regional meetings with all the branch managers. And once again, the good thing is people were really interested in hearing from me. I had a good story that I came with from Ericsson. Yeah, so to be honest, I could reuse a lot of the stuff that we did at Ericsson, because this evangelism that I did there for the last year was
setting up for this role, really.
So that's why I think it was a really, from my perspective, perfect match for me. But I would also say that the bank really needed someone like me by that time towards explaining what is actually happening out there, and that even went towards customers. So I was invited not only to talk to the branch managers. Once they heard me, they invited me to talk to their customers, so that I could explain to the customers
where this is going,
what is happening, where is the bank going, and usually have this: what is digitalization, what is happening in the wider industry, what is happening in the banking industry, and what examples of what we do at Handelsbanken.
So that was an important way, the way it could actually drive change, yes, in that way. And I think it bears a lot of resemblance to the AI transformation that we have to do today as well. Would you agree?
Exactly, yeah.
So if you try to summarize a bit, how really did you make the digitalization, like transformation, happening in Handelsbanken at that time? It was not a hit and run, right? No. It was building the trust, meeting the people.
Educating, a lot of education. A lot of education, but in a way that people can use it, and not I'm coming as a guy and afterwards you think, oh shit, I have no idea. No, you have to. If people left the meeting and they've learned something, and they go home and say, no, I've understood a little more. That I think this is the way how you build trust, how you educate in an organization, because then they also want to hear more. So I was hardly possible to be at all the places where people wanted to talk to me. And once you have this trust, I think then and do this. Via all these conversations, I was, of course, also able to find out what is really the burn, what are the real problems, what are the real problems, and then I was, of course, addressing them and not some cool other stuff, because that was the time when all the other banks came out with their chatbots. All the other banks had chatbots.
It was easy to go on that hype train, but your branch managers were pointing at something. What?
So and then of course also the top people said
this is pre-LLM chatbots.
Exactly, pre-LLM chatbots. So they said, Stephan, we need a chatbot. And I had a team who would have been able to do this, and we were looking into it. We were testing the other chatbots, and we came back and said, of course we can do that, but to be honest, we don't think that we should decrease our customer satisfaction and create a bad chatbot that is only bad for the company. And to be honest, and from my personal perspective, it's also bad for my path going forward, because if people see that there's a bad technical solution, that of course is not pushing, it will not help me going forward to come with the next solution. So what we did instead, but of course that was the first stages of AI. Yeah. But of course we said we cannot do nothing. Yeah. But then we built actually an AI based on natural language processing, who helped us in an area where we really had a problem, totally invisible. But a very good story internally to show and prove that this technology is helping us. We did it in a way that there was not a huge risk. End consumers were not affected by this. By that time, I would say pretty bad solutions. But it created a cool proof point for us internally that we were able to deliver something with this technology, and also opened the door then for the next step of solutions.
Speaking, if we just try to make some comparisons here, for the digitalization transformation and the AI transformation, and especially Handelsbanken, you had a very decentralized approach, strong spokes, if you call it that, in the branch offices that you did have. Was it also that you tried to create some more centralized kind of governance of that, or how did you try to manage this kind of decentralized organization that you had?
Exactly, and this is of course where, because one of the big things that I think happened during my time was the realization that we are not able to deliver this Handelsbanken approach and feeling to most of the customers, because the branches were of course not able to take care of all the customers in that way and meet them in this personal way. So
you get to the point that where the decentralized way, where you can go completely on your own way physically. You need to rethink how that should work when you have because I mean, like the alternative that each branch builds their own app, that would be completely a fragmented digital experience.
Yeah.
So that's a tricky one. Yeah.
That's a tricky one, and this of course also, but I think it was not that hard to realize that we need some kind of system support, just call it system or whatever, IT support. IT system that helps our people, our customer-facing people, to deliver the Handelsbanken experience to more customers. And that opened the door for the whole CRM discussion, because Handelsbanken had no CRM system. Still, we had 98% interaction with the digital channels. We had a very good Handelsbanken telephone service. We had the branches, so we definitely had all these different channels, but no system who supported it. And at the end of the day, the branch manager, who should be the branches, the bank responsible for all of these interactions, he was not able to do that. And that started, based on all these decentralized responsibilities, I think the need, and even the branch manager said, help us, to give us something. It was not that they said we want to build everything on our own, but we need some kind of help to handle.
I think it's funny because it I think also is related to a lot of people in the AI and data space. Are thinking about data mesh, and I think a lot of them are misinterpreting that and is completely decentralizing too much without a centralized kind of coordination that you do need to have in some kind of hub that is supporting all of the different spokes or the parts that you have in the organization. So it's fun to hear, how you come from that perspective as well. But perhaps if we could move to a bit more of an AI topic as well. And we started to speak about chatbot, but it's almost like, without AI, I guess, in that time. And it's more manually programmed, intent-based kind of chatbots at that time. But how was the more AI-related journey? When did you actually start on that?
If we jump to the later years, I mean, like the last couple of years now, I mean, like if we used pre and post GPT launch, because it's something that shifts here. I mean, like we felt it so strongly on this pod as well, right? Yeah. So if we look at the last couple of years from 21, 22, I mean, like
when did it start? When did the AI journey start?
Exactly. And this is I think when you're looking at Gartner studies or whatever, what's the AI usage in different industries? Pre-GPT, the financial services industry was also one of the biggest users of AI.
Which type of machine learning then? Fraud, of course.
Exactly.
AML.
Yeah.
AML stuff.
Algorithmic trading.
Algorithmic trading. So
Risk-
we had
risk
what we
models.
now call traditional machine learning.
So in traditional AI, at least from what I've seen, the banks,
They were on it.
they were on it.
Yeah.
And because they had a huge amount of data, they had a lot of learning data, they have a lot of transactions, they have a lot of...
It's a data-driven business, so there's data to be made to feed the machine learning with.
Exactly. So in the old world, there was, and also a pretty good steering model, making it compliant, how to handle this old-fashioned AI. When I look at the status right now, and I've just was on a conference on Monday, where one of the former Gartner guys was showing the adoption of generative AI in different industries. All the banks are way behind, and that's why when you ask me how do you drive the post GPT AI journey in a bank, that's something totally different than the pre-ChatGPT, because this is the black box. Nobody really knows how it works, AI stuff, and in a deterministic, regulatory-driven world where the whole steering model is to steer, regulation comes in, you put this into directives, and the directives are steering the people, and then you make all kinds of education about these directives. You make some testing. Are you following these rules? And
it's an extremely deterministic philosophy the whole way through that is ingrained in the whole model for it to work safely. And now we're entering into a stochastic probabilistic technology that we then need to realize what is the strengths and opportunity with that, but we need to harness it. And I think what you said now is so true and refreshing, because sometimes I think we're bullshitting about this when we're talking at conferences and we're doing this and this and this. Like actually, you were pretty fucking good at machine learning when it came to risk and fraud and traditional machine learning, but you have not found your DNA how to do that practically with systems that are going as an antithesis to how you steered.
Yeah.
So it's not about that we can't use the technology, but we need to harness the technology to work in this setting. Is that a fair summary? I'm putting
absolutely
words.
yes, really good words to express what I was trying to say, and this is why I think this AI governance topic is probably the big shit thing in banks.
Yes,
because it's. And from my perspective, and once again, I'm talking to all kinds of industries, and from my perspective, it's a very different thing, AI governance in banking versus AI governance in retail. Because in banking, nothing is allowed to go wrong, and the regulations, and of course things go wrong and people make mistakes, whatever. But the whole system is built around how do I handle people, their decisions, their responsibilities, how do I have a 4I principle to make sure that your wrong decision doesn't get out to the customer. And this model is so well played, because I mean the system works pretty well, but the risk of something going wrong are of course also extreme. I mean we have been through banking crisis and so on. So the risk appetite to let something in, which wouldn't say nobody, but you cannot really explain it. It's very hard to set boundaries around it, are so high that I think that's one of the big reasons why the adoption of generative AI in the banking sector is not really high.
The bank sector has been a bit falling behind, perhaps.
I would say a bit. Yes, Bank of America is not allowing any code assistant tools.
Not even for development purposes.
Oh no.
So and the interesting thing, I mean, like you had Matthias Frost on the panel. He's a good friend, and he has a new role in as AI adoption in Nordea, and I brought him over together with me. We were hosting. Derek was hosting a masterclass within the CDO IQ conference, and he talks about this a little bit like when we do this stuff, we need to embrace compliance. So we can't do an innovation in a bank without embracing AI and doing things by design, which is, to me, this is so obvious, but I think this is a big gap in understanding that we are using probabilistic and stochastic technologies or techniques because it has some major advantages. But we still need to harness it in and put the reins on it. So
but how do we do that? How do we get around, now finding the value that is still there for generative AI, even in a sector like the banking industry?
And I think, to be honest, it's probably maybe sounds a little boring, but number one thing is to keep a human in the loop, and not maybe because it's better, but because it fulfills this old steering model, the old governance model. Because the old governance model is based on steering and governing people. Yeah. And even though if those people don't really do a lot, you still can point at a person who
still should be able to review it and have the responsibility for what's being done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One reason why this doesn't really work is that I would say a lot of the leaders don't trust people anymore if they get too much help.
Too much help.
Yeah, I mean, if you're only the human in the loop to push the button and say this is okay, this is okay, this is okay. If you push this button 1,000 times a day, you will also push it the 1,001st time, even if it's wrong.
Yeah.
So just to have this human in the loop idea, you have to make it a little smarter so that the humans who are in the loop don't get so dumb that they don't take the responsibilities anymore.
But it is once again the question of nuance and understanding on a deeper level, how we design and how we then do security compliance and this by design. And I think this is the challenge now, because we can talk about the what is this, what is that. We need to design this. And I think that's what Matthias is doing, and that's what we're talking about here. How does this rewire our connection to compliance? How does this rewire our... we have all these different things, how it used to work in the bank.
Yeah.
They are still there, and they're still needing to do their job, but we now need to flip it and re-engineer how they do their job and how that is influencing how we build systems. So it's not two worlds, but it's this rewiring, Matthias says. I like that rhetoric. What do you think about that?
And I think it's something that has to be done pretty new, because, I mean, these cool slogans like compliance by design, I think companies have found a way how to do this in the old world. But there is no. I haven't seen a good way how compliance by design works in this stochastic world.
No,
like
I then you need to talk to me, and you need to talk to Anders, because you need to look carefully at how SpaceX is doing this kind of stuff, right? So of course it's doable, but it's you need to re-engineer the core operating model around how you do these things. But it's completely doable. I mean, like, we can go into the SpaceX example, who is sort of super agile in one of the most compliance-driven. I mean, like, there are ways to do it.
But I think it's interesting from the culture point of view in the bank sector. They are very governance-minded, if you call it that. And then how do you go about doing that in that sector? I think it's a super interesting topic. Of course, we can have technical solutions for this, which SpaceX and others are doing really well, and also from a methodology point of view. But still, how should we go about doing that? I don't, of course, I would like to hear your thoughts here. You want to be able to use technique like generative AI, even though it's super hard to really understand. I would actually argue that even traditional machine learning is super hard to understand and easily misinterpreted. But still, how do we make banking sector do that? Do you have any thoughts about that? What could make them trust AI for development purposes, or even in the products, in the chatbots and whatnot?
And I think number one is of course to make them lean into the topic, because I think in a lot of compliance organizations, they just hands off, they go away, and they say they just find reasons why you're not allowed to do it. So it comes back to a little what I said at the beginning. How do you drive this change? You have to create the trust in this department as well, and maybe help them solve their problems with generative AI.
Their problem as the what?
Yeah, the problem is, how do we know what kind of regulation is coming? Because I mean they're living in their own world. They have their own challenges, and they have
which regulation do they need to comply with, and which regulation fits in which part of the bank,
so
etc.
and how I mean and I mean there are some places, and actually there's a pretty cool guy in the department in Sweden who was very open, and he was out there scanning and seeing what kind of generative AI solutions are there that help us do our business better, and how can we scan, for example, there's a new regulation coming to us, what do we have to change in our rules internally in the bank, and just to get a first scanning and understand, because I mean reading all that stuff from the EU, that's not the easiest thing to do. So I think, coming back to your question, how do you do this? I think one of the first steps could be to help the compliance people to handle their business or their task in a better way, and make sure if they can increase their accuracy and their quality with the help of GenAI.
But I have a different view on this, quite different, because I think that you are trying to find a solution within a organizational setup that was done for a different purpose in an analog world. And I think that first you need to understand where the blind spot is, the problem, and then you are realizing, okay, that's what is the problem, how do we solve it? This is where I look at it completely different to many people. I don't think you can solve the how in the old org template. I think the how then brings you to a different understanding of how you organize these resources. Ultimately, you get to a point when you do compliance by design, it means it's part of the product team to do compliance. And it means the role and how you execute on compliance is not done by one team that has tech competence, and then you have another team by business competence. So I basically think in order to solve it properly, it cannot be done as long as you have division of labor as your core organizational model. I think that's the main problem.
And I like it that you disagree, but no, and I think your approach in an ordinary company where they dare to take the risk and make this organizational changes probably is right. But in a bank where, I mean, the compliance organization will not go away that fast. There's nobody coming from the top and say, no, we have to reorganize and have to shuffle them together with that. So I think that's why I think you have to get them on board on that journey. Then if the end game maybe is what you said, that could be right. But if you have those people against you, you will not move a millimeter.
No, so let's be sharp here, because I fully agree with you on this one. And this is a little bit like how I understand rewiring short term and then evolving into a new organism that we don't know how that looks like. So I fully agree with you. You need to get them on board. But to get them on board is actually to them to unlearn how they looked at compliance in the old way and understanding how they do compliance in a new way. So this is a massive evangelism and education journey. And this is why it's not a flick of a switch, but rather a co-creation on what the new operating model should be like. So no one can draw this map. If McKinsey says they can draw this map now, that's bullshit. It's this co-creation on the problem and having a common understanding for how did we do compliance in the past and how should we now figure this out.
I think I can combine the two thinkings here. And let me give it
because I respect your
I think
angle is
both
correct.
Right in some ways, and I can see both points here. One for one, if you think of the compliance team as the hub for compliance, then if we don't get them on board and they don't understand the value and how we can actually have value AI that really helps them in their purposes, it will be dead anyway. So we certainly need to get them on board, and I think that's a very good point I think you're making. But then if we take the developer team and someone else, and traditionally you have this kind of competition between the tech and the compliance team and other like product team and whatnot, and that is hurtful as well. And we should really make the development team then have at least some spokes, some people that is actually responsible and actually part of the team working together with the compliance team, and in that way having this kind of collaboration, right?
Absolutely.
If you do these two together, then perhaps you can have some kind of.
Of course, and I think this.
So I talked about the end game, but there's a journey to the end game, which is starting where you are.
Yeah.
I think then it's.
And I think we probably agree on what has to
so.
happen, and I think one way of aligning and bringing them together and change this way of addressing the whole compliance game is bringing those people together and because I think the compliance function itself will have a pretty hard. It's not that easy to unlearn what you've been doing for the last hundreds of years, obviously in a way. So you need to bring along the tech people to help them do this.
Let me try another one, because I think we are at one of the core ideas. If you want to talk about AI in banking and how to do that, to ignore the compliance argument and discussion is just bullshit, because then it's innovation theater. And another thing that I think is what I'm talking about is not so much. Is one thing is about how the hub and spoke thing works, but sometimes we don't speak enough about. We are growing up in a bank or even in manufacturing in what I would define as a process-oriented operating model, and where we are handing over in different swimming lanes where we should do things. And the core idea here is like you can have a hub and spoke and stick in the process-oriented thinking and steering and governance. And the problem with that is that now we're getting to the point where you need to have a product-centric understanding of workflow. So if I'm working in, credit or whatever, like take one core workflow, you need to be able to go 360 degrees around the actual workflows. What's the data around that? What's the algorithms around that? What's the AI agents around that? And therefore, you need to start looking at that almost like this is a workflow, but we need to have a product-centric understanding to govern this workflow. And all of a sudden now, you get to a point where compliance as a function is a setup to do advisory or looking into process. And all of a sudden now, the hub and spoke is not only hub and spoke, but it's also, okay, how would we work as a function in compliance when we are supporting product teams and when the spoke is the product, so to speak, the workflow is the product. So you see what I'm saying with the product-centric versus process-centric?
Yeah.
This is another mindset shift that I think is part of that onboarding. What do you think about that?
First of all, I would say that even the process maturity is not very high.
Yeah, that's a problem. Even there, you can skip that game. What do you mean with that? What do you mean it's not? Of course, no. How can you say the bank is not mature in process?
I was waiting for that question. Yeah. And
what do you mean?
Yeah, of course, there are some processes like the credit process. And I mean, there are some processes which are very also centralized steered, because I mean, even in a bank like Handelsbanken, which is extremely decentralized, there are some processes who are like IT security, credit process. They are extremely centralized steered, and nobody's stepping out of that. But a lot of the other processes, I would say they are not really described. It's pretty unclear who is the process owner. There are no measurements around it.
So it's more humanistic than we think.
Yeah, it's much more, and it's also, and especially in a bank where people usually stay for all their working life. It's very much based on relationships. So instead of having those descriptions,
there's a lot of tacit knowledge.
Interesting.
Yeah. Cool.
It's time for AI News, brought to you by AIAW Podcast.
Cool. So we usually take a small break in the middle of the podcast to speak about some recent AI news happening. And we try to keep it short. We'll usually fail, but we'll see how it goes this time. Henrik, do you have any favorite news?
Let's start with Stephan. Do you have any things that you picked up on in this sort of news feed around AI last week? Or
for me, it's more the we talked about the sovereignty before.
Yeah.
What I think is of course pretty cool and interesting is to see what's happening in Germany about AI investments. When Deutsche Telekom, I think, announced that they're going to invest 10 billion euros in a new AI factory in Munich. And I think the week after, Lidl,
Yeah.
the Schwarzkopf said we're going to do 100 billion in an AI factory.
And Lidl is driving.
I think it's little popping up as what?
So I think this was one of, because I'm coming from Deutsche Telekom, as you know, so that was one of the funniest things I've
But what
read.
is your angle? What's the angle? What's your, when you're reading this with your knowledge about the industry, and what's your interpretation of these plays? Where are they leading?
I mean, it's a very much a political thing, to be honest. I think it's a very much a political thing. And because, I mean, some ministers from the government were part of this Deutsche Telekom stuff, and said, oh, this is the biggest investment, now we're going to become independent, and blah, blah, blah. And then once again, a week later, Lidl did it times 10. Yeah. And nobody was there. So I think it's more, at the moment, I think it's big enough. Feels a little
big, sovereignty play, right?
The sovereignty play is something that works right now.
Yeah, exactly. That's my news.
Do you think they will succeed? I mean, Lidl is still a big company, right?
Yeah. I mean, they have a huge captive business. I think the good thing about Lidl is, and then they're going to make this, they do this Amazon play, again, because they have so much captive business that they will probably be able to fill a lot of this capacity with their own business. And they are also there. I think they made some good recruitments. I think they will be able to do this.
So you consider this, it's a huge number, but it's still a fairly serious play in terms of, actually it makes sense for them almost from an internal perspective.
Exactly.
So that's the Amazon angle, right? You start building a platform and then you realize, shit, I could sell this platform.
But it's not only that. I think also that the big cloud providers otherwise in US, the reason they become successful is that they started for 10 years to build like AI and IT infrastructure for their own purposes and then turn it publicly.
So
this is actually one of the few companies, I would say, in Europe that can do that.
Yeah, so it's
I hope that they actually do succeed. And it's a big number.
It's a big number, and it's an interesting, it's the right way and the right purpose to start, because that purpose has been proven before. That's what I mean.
And I mean, the T-Systems, like I said before, came from the similar perspective. Yeah, it was the captive business for Deutsche Telekom, Deutsche Post, EADS, Daimler Chrysler. So there was a huge captive business, and they said, well, why don't we sell this to other companies? From my experience, it's easy on paper, but not that easy to do.
Do you know how many
in
years
reality.
they will spend this kind of 100 billion euros?
No, I don't know.
But it's
Do you
not
believe in
year,
it? Okay, what's yours? Oh my God, this is a bad idea. This is because I kind of. What's your take on that?
I think that comes back on, we had a small sovereignty discussion before, because I think a lot of companies want to discuss it, but I'm not so sure. I think, to be honest, my personal view, as soon as there's a new president in the US, things will move back.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a good comment.
Yeah.
Anyway, Anders, you or Goran, do you want to start?
I think Anders can start, and then we can, or maybe I can start.
Yeah, it's for fun.
And if you want to take GDC, I can take another one.
Take the GTC.
No, but you can take the GDC. I can just comment on it.
Because I want to take another one, but I can take GTC as well. But
Take a GTC and I can comment on it.
okay.
What I saw there is because I spent like a week.
But then you take
together
both,
with
But
Anders.
you went there, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I was there with around like.
So now we're doing GTC. What is GTC?
Yeah, the GTC is NVIDIA's annual what is called developer conference. I mean, it was
huge.
developer. Now it's not developer anymore.
Everyone.
It's a little bit to everybody.
Super big.
Super big. I think it was. They were saying that they sold out around 120,000 tickets.
It's amazing. Well, fucked up number.
I was had the privilege to be in the stadium, in SAP stadium that they have in San Jose when he was delivering this year's.
So how big is that thing? Like it's like 50. It's like one of the big football teams.
So it was not the full stadium because usually, like in a concert, you divide it a little bit, but I think it was around 2/3. So in my calculation, between 20 to 25,000 people.
The
were
rock
there.
star was Jensen,
Full
right?
seat. There was no place where to drop a needle.
This is like a U2 rock concert, but it's Jensen, right?
You would
It's
not
Jensen.
believe people were queuing from the 7 o'clock in the morning, and he came around 11.
So these guys are
11:10.
rock stars now. That's what we can summarize.
Yeah. So this is that is the rock stars right now. So it was a huge actually build up towards that. And before that, before his presentation, there was a very good, powerful panels from Anthropic and Chloe.
Yeah.
and everybody else. So it was like a very big build up towards there. I was part of a Swedish, actually a Nordic delegation that went to GTC, around 250 people in total. So we had like activities around the whole week around GTC as well. It was orchestrated by NVIDIA and Dell together with Sweden as well. It was great. It was a lot of great memories and a good business actually around that. So it was super cool. The interesting thing about it was that they were talking about, I don't know, did you hear about the 5-layer cake?
No, I missed that.
No, I will show you. So the 5-layer cake, it was basically something that came up, and there was also side gigs and events actually around this 5-layer cake, which is basically the 5 layers of making AI operational, starting from energy to chips to what you have. So it's basically on the first one, you have the energy, the foundation, then you have the chips, you have the infrastructure, then you have the models, and then you have applications. And NVIDIA is perceived basically as a chip company, right? But with the latest move that they have been building up for the past 2 years, and keep in mind, Jens, it doesn't do anything basically from today. He has been building up this for the past 2 years. Now they are operational in all 5 layers. That is the 5 layers of cake, right? So you have energy, chips, infrastructure, models, and applications. The interesting was like how the exhibition was built, because you had the 5-layer cake plus the robotics. So it was around like 200 exhibitors there. You could find the biggest ones as well. Super interesting for me, because some of these companies we have never had it in Nordic, so I had a chance to speak with him. And then he introduced like a couple of things which is basically in the 5-layer cake, of course. So he started with the energy. That was the Vera Rubin systems, which is like huge, basically systems that you can stack a lot of these NVIDIA DGXs and H100s and Blackwells and whatnot.
Let's speak more about that.
Yes, you can do that, right? So then there was like there was new basically offerings within the H100 and Blackwell GPUs. Then in the infrastructure, you have the AI factory. So it was full with people that and companies that are working with data centers and neo centers. That is the AI basically inference. Inference was a lot of discussion there. Then you had the models. So they basically had like the 120 billion parameter open model, which is called like a Nemotron 3 Super, I think. That was, you can speak a little bit more in depth about that. And the build up, of course, it was about this Nemo Cloud, which is basically on top of the the idea was actually how he presented like the renaissance of AI is here. My takeaway from that, it is completely right, but we need to also have a renaissance in organizational and enterprise application of this, because as he's showing it, the technology is there, the compute is there, there is an ecosystem to operate AI, but we need to, what we are discussing today, start actually implementing these things into place, because the Nemo Cloud that he's introducing is actually an open source model that can help organization to safely, responsibly operate what is called like agentic AI or projects into the organization. However, to what we are discussing today, is that simple or not, that is a different story. And this is actually where it becomes interesting. I think that we are in a point of time where it is more clear than ever that we need to get our shit together and start implementing these things for real, because the technology is there. People are making, there was a lot of startups, and these startups are leaning just more and more forward. They're just going and running at it, and we are just sitting and putting in.
But it proves the point that the data AI adoption industrialization company like Derdax, founded in 2019, is the only name in town. I mean, like it's not a technology problem anymore. Even to do it.
I think that's just too simplistic to say.
No, but I'm saying to get value out of AI with the technology that is around today.
But I think there are a lot of shifts. And if I just were to give some views of the trend shifts, so to speak, that were given in GTC, I think there are a lot of shifts in terms of actually technology as well, which is interesting. And One, of course, is that it moves from the traditional discussion about, oh, we have Opus, or we have GPT, or we have, a new Gemini model, to instead speak about systems. So moving from discussion about, how is this model performing, to actually having more encompassing systems around it. And of course, we're speaking about OpenClaw here, and then how NVIDIA has embraced that and built a system around that for enterprise purposes, to actually do find value in an enterprise, to actually do add the additional functionality about authorization and logging and supervision and security that you need to be able to use this kind of system in an enterprise setting. So, but still, starting to speak about how AI is moving from just being the type of reactive chatbot to actually being a system that is proactive and always on, as OpenClaw and NemoClaw now that NVIDIA has, is of course a big thing. So he even speaks about OpenClaw being an operating system for agents, which could be an interesting way to speak about it. And I think that's a big trend shift, of course, building on an OpenClaw trend. But that's a big shift.
It's a shift.
It is a system, because he's talking about. There was no discussion anymore about AI as a one or another. Model. It was actually an ecosystem, an operating model that you need to actually.
But this is a shift in rhetorics and how the industry is trying to sell shit.
No, it's actually a shift how you use AI.
I talked about AI compound system, Berkeley. I mean, I had this system view. I've had this system view.
That's wrong view, I think.
I must agree with Anders in this case, because I think that the ecosystem that we were seeing there, in terms of just basically by going to the exhibitors, you can see that right now it's everything coming together. Yes, you are correct. In the ways how we could have implemented this, but you can see that the whole ecosystem was there. There was like data centers, AI centers, cooling, energy suppliers, utility companies. Everybody now is in the same race. Before that, it was divided race.
Yes, and now I get your point, because my point of view, which is the enterprise point of view, how you navigate to safety, scalable AI, has always been a system perspective. Yes. And we had a hard time because we needed to figure out how to pull the pieces together to create a system. Sure. And what you are saying now is the industry was going in these like pockets, and now the industry is telling the system story, and they're building things more as a system.
But we have technological support that we haven't had in the past.
No, you needed to be smart. Shift. No, you fixed it, but you needed to stitch that yourself together.
Of course, we still need to do the organizational change. That's always been there. But it's a big shift how now we can have these kind of proactive systems, and they actually storing memory in a way with the souls and the skills and everything.
But what I'm trying to get to, Anders, if I'm understanding you right or not, I think the smart people who understood this from the past has gone the systemic or system way, but it was a pain in the ass to stitch it all together. And now it becomes more. I don't think the technology
existed.
Or do you think? Or do you think? I mean, because I think you understood and you knew this, and you've been trying to, and now it becomes more doable.
It was actually surprisingly. I mean, if you just take OpenClaw as an example, as Jensen said himself, this is the biggest open source project ever. It's never been a product that had this kind of increase in popularity ever, compared even to the Linux system or to Databricks or to Spark or whatever. I mean, it is a big change how we actually had a system that now can operate as an operating system for agents. That was a big revolution. So there has been, we wanted to do this for a long time, but we haven't been able to. And now it was a big shift here. So I think we need to recognize the shift at least.
Because I thought this was something that the best of the best were doing, but it was a pain in the ass to stitch it all together. But you are saying actually to some degrees we were missing components that was making it really hard.
Yeah.
So this is what is that what are we?
Yeah.
Because I was, okay.
I'm with you on that I didn't think that the OpenClaw moment was so big. Mm. But when you landed in San Jose, in Palo Alto, we were everywhere there. It's like, in Silicon Valley and visiting. That is the one revolutionary moment for decades that is changing something. I didn't understand that, but when you landed there, you knew this is it. Everybody was talking about that.
OpenClaw.
So everyone will copy this. I mean, now Google will do their own version of this. Amazon will do their own version of this. Everyone will go in this direction. It's a new type of proactive, always-on AI system that will be copied everywhere. I'm very sure about
Yeah,
this.
and I mean, if I'm allowed to hop in here,
Yes, please.
all the people that I'm talking to, they have no clue what's happening.
Yeah. No, nothing. Who knows about OpenClaw in the enterprise market?
Yeah,
None.
nobody knows how to, and that's why nobody's. I agree to you. I think this was a big moment in the industry, especially if you realize that this is one guy from Austria who created all that stuff. Yeah,
Exactly.
So I mean,
even more impressive.
yeah.
You don't need to have billions.
So, and if this is possible for one guy from Austria to do, what will be possible in 5 years for corporation like Google or whatever to do? So I think why I believe this is a pivotal moment is not that he created OpenClaw, but if one guy can do something like this, what will a whole organization will be able to do in
But
5
it's also
years?
an innovation thing. It's not really that you were able to program it. It's really come up with this kind of really smart idea, right? And it's possible for one single person to do it.
But coming back to my first point, I would say,
Although Jensen said, like, I pointed on this architecture 2 years ago.
that's of course good. But
it's like a Schmidt-Huber.
coming back to my because if this podcast is more about the enterprise perspective of it, all the enterprise people I've talked to so far, they know what they don't know what's happening.
The enterprise divide is massive.
So-
because we have completely different
But it is. I think we hope we can agree that this is a big shift, and most people haven't really understood it yet. I think Jensen has, and I think we'll see it in a lot of enterprise. In all the cloud providers, they will do a copy of this and have their own version of it and sell it like crazy, and it will change value possibilities.
But what it means is also then that even if Handelsbanken or the other enterprises for Scania doesn't have a clue about what we're talking about, we can tell them what they're going to be sold in 2 years' time. This is the argument that they can start preparing for. Is that true?
But the question is, who should they buy it from?
The cloud providers, or they can do it themselves. Yeah, who knows?
But now you
just-
also have open source.
I mean, like,
you-
this is
you
the
have a
point,
good
right?
team,
So
you can
Renity
build it
people
yourself.
don't-
You can't
if
use
you
the
want to go to
enterprise, right?
Renity,
So you need
open
to have
source.
the enterprise functionality. So this
Interesting,
is
yeah.
really what NVIDIA is doing. This is what the cloud providers will be doing. So I think the
I
open
think
source.
it's going to be
will-
wrappers around it that it will be sold as a
Of
SaaS.
course.
I think they
It's
will
good.
redo
Yes,
it.
of
I don't
course.
think, Amazon will just shred it apart, build their own version.
Yeah,
it will
because-
be better, but it will.
Because this is what I said. For me, on many sides, he's been doing very large smart things. But to say that we need an AI compound system, we need to figure out what memory is and what all these things. As thinking, pieces of it has been around for a couple of years already.
No, it
I
was a
think you
big
have.
shift. It is a big shift. We haven't seen this possibility. We wanted to have it, but we haven't seen how to do it.
Yeah, you're right. It's to dream about it versus someone building it is a little bit different.
Okay, so just 2 other shifts, I think, from GTC as well.
Well,
And I
this
would
was
love-
the best news that we have pulled out this year. I think it was very good.
Because it's a new
No,
with
but
an
I want to
impact,
bring up my
and we are
favorite
giving a
topic as well.
trajectory.
Just to finish this, I'm really grateful for this journey because we had the opportunity to visit a lot of the Silicon Valley giants and etc. So it was super good, and I'm looking forward to. They're planning already for next year and etc. And many people can join, so it's gonna be super cool.
I want to join next year.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be. It's
Sounded
it
so
was,
much fun.
It was very well organized. There was a lot of so Wallenbergs were there. The Slotner was there. We had like a reception. So there was a Nordic reception. We did hackathons. We promoted a lot of what is called Swedish and Nordic startups there. There was quite a lot of cool things that were happening around it. There was like a really big influence. Like, hey, the Nordics are here, etc. It felt just getting into a conference room and then you hear like 150 Swedish people.
That's funny.
Yeah, that is really cool. So, I think it was really nice, man. Go for it.
Okay, so we spent far too much time now on this, but I'm trying to be really brief here.
But it's a big moment, I
We will
guess.
go to 3 hours.
We have hit 3 hours,
That's cool.
Stefan.
No problem for me. Man.
But you mentioned Vera Rubin, and I think it's
so in a
interesting.
pause of 2 hours, I allow it.
Toilet break. Okay, but just to, I think Vera Rubin is cool. And it's not really for the reason Jensen mentioned, but so Vera Rubin is basically the successor of the Grace Blackwell. Is the next one from the Hopper and the other kind of GPUs that NVIDIA has. But what's special about Vera Rubin? So Vera is a CPU, Rubin is the
We're talking about
GPU,
names of
and
technology.
then for GP, we have Grace Blackwell. Grace was a CPU, Blackwell was a GPU before. Now it's the next version of that. But what's different here is actually going a bit neuromorphic. And now you see what I'm interested in.
Let's go neuromorphic, not quantum, neuromorphic, yes.
And you haven't been listening perhaps before, Stephan, about this, but yeah, I'm a big fan of neuromorphic, and basically we have a problem with computers that have memory and CPU separated, and all the power that the current kind of computers and machines needs today is just to move the memory back and forth all the time and flipping the switch. So neuromorphic is about moving them together and even having it in the same as memory systems have. But Vera Rubin is doing that. So they are moving memory not in the same transistor as proper neuromorphic, but very much closer to basically the same die, meaning they can go from, the transfer speed, the bandwidth of moving memory was in Grace Blackwell, I think, like 8 terabits or something. Now it's 22. So by just moving
Closer.
the memory chip to the same die, they had insanely
What is
much
die?
faster.
In a chip, what is die?
Die is the wafer, basically.
The wafer is the die, right?
Yeah, you remember Kage Lupescu when he was
He has a major, the Thiberath wafer is massive, right?
Yeah.
So what you are saying now is like you're moving the memory and storage
into the same
in
package.
in,
more or
in the
less.
same wafer die, right? And then we can 20 times making the transfer speed faster.
Yeah, at least four or five times. But still, a massive improvement by making the problem with the memory bandwidth problem that we see in
So
the
it's
past.
like it's like von Neumann with distance to von Neumann with small distance, and then if you go even further, you can get to neuromorphic.
Yeah. So, and then of course a big problem would be in the future that we have so much inference demand, and the training demand will be like very, very small compared to the inference demand here. So, NVIDIA also has a deal with Cerebras.
Yes, but Cerebras is the kings of inference. We know that, right? So Cerebras is the ones that said, instead of having all these GPUs in many different chips, why don't we do one big wafer and have everything in one mega chip? Which then obviously is like 20 times more faster inference, right? Which is the number one use case is the speed around inference. So it means
Cerebras is also very neuromorphic-ish.
so it's going in that direction, but still, but it means sort of all of them. Perplexity, OpenAI, everybody have done on their premium offers. They are running on Cerebras machines in order to get speed of inference, which means it translates to the whole. When you do the more advanced thinking you're doing and reasoning, if you're taking the premium,
Yes, stop talking now. Jesus Christ. We have to cut this short, right?
it's so cool. It's so cool.
But just, I want to have an Elon story as well in here with the Terafab, and perhaps you can find a segue to this topic.
It's not that you're talking, but there needs to be a place for Elon Musk in this.
Yes. Okay, so moving into the automotive, self-driving cars, physics, AI kind of world. And of course, NVIDIA is playing big here. They have the big Alpha Mayo, the open source version of self-driving car kind of functionality. But they also had a big deal with all the automakers in trying to find, they can be the orchestrator of self-driving cars, and trying to by bringing, I think, 12, 13 of these kind of companies together, they can at least build this best kind of FSD into the world. And of course, it's a big play against Elon, because Elon is having the best solution here, I would argue. And then they are saying that we can at least, starting to find an alternative, which I think is super good. Because I'm really scared about the concentration of power.
But who is in this consortium?
Mercedes and BMW.
And what's it called again? Terra.
No. Okay, but Terra is another thing.
That's another.
I'm coming to that soon.
Okay.
So, during the GTC, they actually did this kind of, I don't recall exactly what it was called, but they did a launch where they had a partnership with a lot of automotive companies that are working together to build up this kind of, autonomous driving kind of functionality, right? Because they can't do it themselves, then they have the partnership, and with NVIDIA, they should rule the world. But I don't think they will. So, but I hope. I think it's super good because we need to find an answer.
So this was actually discussed on GTC as well.
I actually don't agree.
Okay.
Because I think that Google is actually leading the way.
Okay. Just because you drove a Waymo.
Dude, so in 1 week, I think we had like at least like a 50 of those drives, and I don't understand if people, if people didn't believe that this is actually this is working, it's working. Go to San Francisco, you will find more autonomous vehicle on the
of course.
Yes, and that is Google. And then you have Chime, which is not Chime, it's something Chime or something like, I don't know what's called, which is Amazon. No, it's Amazon and Google. And Google.
I know, Waymo is big.
What are we talking about? Like the Tesla's like 2 times the switch.
This is such a rabbit hole. This is different technology. It's done in a different way. It's bullshit. It's not the same.
Let me see if I can convince you then.
Yes, I mean, but at least I found. I didn't.
You're talking to me. Shut up and let me go back to the story.
All right, we are ruining the podcast, so let's go back.
Okay.
We take this afterward.
But finish it up now, Anders.
Okay.
You have a point.
That story. So I just want to make this segue to TerraFab. Okay, so Elon just made this amazing story about the biggest kind of investment ever, and they're going to build their own factory for ships, right? Now, we know that the ship manufacturing is very much a monopoly now for TSMC and NVIDIA. Together, NVIDIA is designing the ships, and then TSMC is manufacturing them. And then we have the European ASML who's creating the machine, the lithography machine that is creating it. And Elon, of course, wants to reduce the dependency and the huge margin. NVIDIA is taking like 70-80% margin on every kind of ship. It's insane.
Crazy.
Insane. So, of course, he wants to get rid of that. So he's launching this new super big TerraFab announcement. Now, what he's saying with TerraFab is basically saying it's going to produce a terawatt of compute per year. Now, today, if you combine what TSMC and the rest of the world is doing, it's about 20 gigawatts. It's a 50th.
Terra?
So he's going to say that with TerraFab, they're going to produce 50 times more than we're doing today in compute.
And when? By what time? Time frame?
2030-ish.
And you want to ramp up to have that capacity in 2030.
And he's going to do it on the moon.
This is cool stuff. Yeah, cool stuff.
Isn't this amazing?
That's amazing.
I love it. But I mean, so. I'm learning from these guys every time. Make your claim the most outrageous, and then you get media, and then you sell some other shit.
And then even people in Sweden will talk about it, huh?
Yeah.
But it's cool, man.
By the way, I bought the plot next to the factory so I can.
But is it just bullshit, or how can we look at this as any?
Of course, the starships, that the sea is building, that's going to be the enabler for him to be able to build the manufacturing on the moon. He's already starting this year with the manufacturing in Texas, Austin, for the advanced ship manufacturing plant, whatever. It's just more or less a prototype. And then he's going to start to build up the production on the moon as well in the end. And the reason is he's, of course, doing the data centers in space. So by building the data centers in space and having the ships there, they have a huge amount of more energy directly from the sun, much more than ever can do on Earth. And if we just can get the cost of bringing the material and the necessary conditions into the moon, then the manufacturing there will be much cheaper. The launch cost, since the gravity is so much less on the moon, is 6 times less. They don't need a rocket. They don't need rockets to launch the satellites anymore. So as soon as you come to the point where it's cheaper to just get the material from Earth to the moon, it will be much cheaper to build and run satellites and data centers in space there.
But
This is not just Elon doing this. This is actually Amazon. Everyone is
so the
doing
logic,
this.
the logic of the physics that this is a good idea eventually, I think it holds. But are we in the point of view where we can actually industrialize to get there in use 4 years?
He's been running the Starship now for a long time. They more or less need to have it reusable, meaning
But
they already-
this is part of the journey to Mars, of course.
or is it?
I think it is because I think
but can you see that the economical kind of value that he will gain from this is insane,
but the point is
and he
this.
doesn't need to go to the Mars to do it. It's
No.
sufficient to
What
do
I'm
the
saying
moon
is,
thing.
you put the bold game like Mars to go to Mars, and with that bold goal, it unlocks key things that drastically reduces how we do things. We launch Starlink, we launch satellites way cheaper than anyone else, and we own that market. We need to be able to launch things out of from low gravity space, so we need to have a lunar base. Part of the journey to Mars, but at the same time, an insane productivity frontier increase that he gets when he gets that.
And if you get like a conspiracy kind of mindsets, you can say that the Mars thing is from more of a let's say not really the main goal that he's having. He's doing that from more building the enthusiasm up. But in reality, if he just gets to space, if he can build the start to exploit the moon, and what he can do if he start to reuse the material on the moon, Jesus Christ. I'm actually, both excited about this, but I'm super scared about this.
No, so this is the downside of things. Who owns land on moon?
I actually
How does
have.
that work?
There was this website that was selling like space on the moon. I actually have a diploma.
You bought one?
Yeah, I bought one. All right.
You can sell it to Elon. You can sell it to
Talk
Elon.
to Goran. He owns your land. But what is
Hey
it?
guys, but let's go back to how to implement ChatGPT in enterprise.
Yes, okay.
Sorry.
Let's stop this. Okay.
Wow.
Anyway, but I just, this is big news. I think, more
But is
people
it
should be
just?
speaking
Is it
about
just? But is it news or is it just an
I think
exposé? What do you call it? An utspel? Is it news or is it just?
We'll see in a couple
Air.
of years, but I think it will happen.
It creates headlines at least.
Yeah, crazy. What was your view listening to this whole?
It's very entertaining to be
Is
honest.
it-
To listen. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's the first thing I have to say.
That's all That's all we care about. That's all we care about.
Yeah, but I mean, you shouldn't underestimate. I agree to your point. You shouldn't underestimate the power of having extremely bold visions and how this is motivating people around you.
Yeah.
And even if you don't reach the vision
Television, yeah.
all the way, or only the steps in between
is massive.
are massive. So from that perspective, and it's of course, I think to be honest, it's impressive, but also scary how single people are driving
do this.
stuff like this.
It's an
This is
extreme-
very philosophical
very,
question, of
very.
course, maybe not the right thing for this podcast here, but
No, it is right. It is exactly.
you're looking for rabbit holes, yeah?
Yeah,
I heard that before. Yeah.
philosophical. What is we started this based on the AI divide, and this is exactly at the AI divide. What happens when one guy and not the society is doing this?
So, and of course, and unfortunately, from my personal perspective, unfortunately, we see more and more proof points of this. That single guys, outside of democratic rules or whatever, what we think should be right or wrong, are having visions, are able to align people, money, whatever it takes behind them to get going. And even if you don't believe in the vision and you think they never get there, they have such a huge impact on society, because technology-driven business transformation. That's a little my. If technology changes stepwise, it will also have sooner or later a stepwise impact on society and on businesses.
Yeah, and I made a post where I'm trying to explain where the problem is, and I was doing the metaphor. Elon Musk and some other guys are driving race cars around the track and going 100 miles an hour, and then they're with so much money, so they are able to go off the track, crash it, get back on track, and keep moving. And at one time, in one way, it's sort of all the way improving society, improving all this. The problem is the guys responsible for investing in the race car. Right next to the racetrack stands billions of people as spectators looking at the race, spectators of the race. And every time he crashes off the rails, millions of people die as an impact that he's not really, they're spectators. So that's the tricky one when it's like a one-man race is driving this, and it's impressive, but they're not picking up the bill, or they don't really, the way the race is working, they're not responsible for the spectators. That's tricky, eh? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. On the other hand, if they wouldn't race...
If they wouldn't race, would that be better? I'm not sure. Anyway, thank you for that comment. Nice one. Back to the real story of digitalization in enterprise.
Cool. Let's try to bring it down back to that. But
back to Earth.
Back to Earth.
Literally.
Stefan.
Yes.
I mean, I think it's interesting. You have a deep understanding of both the German market, but also then the Nordic market. And I would love to try to understand a bit more. I mean, you both have also the understanding of the telco and the banking industry. So it would be fun to just try to understand a bit, what the differences are there in terms of culture or, maturity or really how the difference is in terms of driving change. If you start with Germany versus the Nordics.
I'm trying to take this from an AI perspective.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think it's of course, I think it's good to understand the basic drivers or differences to also understand how the adoption of different technologies now, for example, AI, from my perspective, are working. And I think the biggest difference that I've experienced, and that doesn't mean that it's right or wrong, but at least from my experience, between the German way of driving a company and the Swedish way, is that in Germany things are much more top down, much more top. Yeah. So if you have a problem, you potentially take in one of the big consulting companies. They make an assessment, and they make an implementation plan, and then they leave you, and then the top leadership thinks the problem is solved. We have an assessment, we have an implementation plan, and then the thing is top down to drive the plan. On the other hand, the organization is trying to find all kinds of reasons why this plan is shit and doesn't work. So that you have somehow the whole organization against you because it's fear, they're going to lose power, whatever, and they don't trust that stuff. And of course, and in a lot of cases, I mean, I've been working on some 20-year-old Porsche guys coming in and explain
council. You need to explain workers' council.
Yeah, I can do this as well. Yeah, which I think has some advantages as well. Yeah, because it's somehow regulatory force, coming back to regulation, but. I think this top-down approach is one. I think the thing that's happening, and in the US maybe even more, but even in Germany, and that means that also from a cultural perspective, people are waiting for someone to tell them what to do.
Right.
And this in an organization with 10, 20, 100,000 people makes, of course, a lot of people waiting for orders. Which also, I mean, I think the hierarchy is a totally different thing. If you have a high position in Germany, people expect you to tell them what to do.
Is that a good or a bad thing?
Start with contrast. Wait. Start with contrasting. What's the Swedish way?
Exactly. So I'm coming back to what is good and bad about the one or the other thing. When I moved to Sweden and I joined Ericsson, I tried to understand what is happening here and how does the company work. I had all kinds of questions and nobody was able to answer them. And then we organized some meetings. There were 10, 20, 50 people joining that because nobody really knew how things are working. And then
it's consensus based.
and then somehow it was this consensus and people agree, everybody knows each other. So much less process driven from my perspective than it was in Germany. But on the other hand, people are much more, they wanted to contribute. So everybody had a from my perspective, very different.
The way you tackle problems becomes very different when you're not waiting for orders, but you're trying to debate and discuss from bottom up in a way, and then the decision is what the majority is doing.
So which makes this process, of course, much longer. Yeah, but then at least it's much wider. Committed, and then it works. In the execution works faster, but the way to find the solutions and to agree on what is happening is endless.
Yeah.
So and that's coming back to your question: what is better, what is worse? I think in a deterministic world where a McKinsey, Bain, BCG, whatever, can come in and make an assessment, fact-based, data-based, and say, this is our assessment, these are the options, this is what we believe is the right thing. It works pretty well.
Yeah.
As long as they have an operational excellence in a way to make people execute it.
This works in a stable, slow-moving context, and now you put this in a VUCA context when you have a scenario and uncertainty. 5 times we said, the index said. Does that work anymore?
Yeah, and that's of course interesting because if you usually it doesn't work because top-down assessment could go very wrong. But if you wait for the bottom-up approach, because it's also fast, it's not only VUCA, it's also extremely fast.
Exactly.
See, if you let organizations work on it for 1 or 2 years to agree on what is the best way, that doesn't work either. So unfortunately, I don't have a clear answer to your question. What is good or what is wrong?
Pros and cons with each, right?
And actually, what you're saying is you are discarding both models. So you are discarding both models and looking for a third. Because the top-down approach, where we are fact-based, but you have limited understanding, we don't have all the tentacles, is one way. The other one, where you have endless debate, is an other way. And what you're looking for is something that has way more agency to act within its approaches. Well, this is a different ball game.
Exactly, and this is, and I
None of
think
them.
this new model
is a third model we're talking about that we need.
The new model has somehow to fit into the debate, because if you have 100,000 people who are waiting for instructions,
doesn't work.
You cannot move this into now you have 100,000 people who are waking up every morning and think, how can I do my work better, and are pushing bottom up.
It doesn't work either.
That doesn't work. Yeah. So I think it's
so it's a third model. Do you see what I mean? Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the prerequisites to create this third model, from my perspective, are better in the Swedish context than the German ones, because here at least you have a lot of people thinking about it and having a driving force and not waiting for stuff.
But now it's about organizing decision flow smarter.
Exactly. So you have to somehow streamline this consensus.
The consensus
process
is clear, but you need to then think about how you compartmentalize that so people can act and move on their thinking, and you end up in a thinking game and consensus game of 5 instead of 50. So you're thinking about agentic. I have a new terminology for me. Distributed agentic intelligence reform. Think about that.
And I don't know if you can stop me if I'm talking too much, but I think this whole agile transformation was one proof point for that. Because I was talking to people from Lidl in Germany, how that worked to introduce agile. Like, not at all. And I think in Sweden worked pretty well, because people were used to take responsibility about themselves, creating these smaller teams, taking responsibility for stuff. So I think coming back to the cultural difference between the different countries, I think in Sweden it's easier to make those changes, because I feel it's a higher maturity in the organizations as well overall. And if you come with a new model, if you can explain it in the right way, you will also get people along.
And it's tricky to say maturity. I think it's simply the cultural fit is naturally higher for that angle. So that in this sense, they start from a higher maturity point of view if you go in this decentralized direction.
Yeah, and I mean, I got a lot of questions from my friends in Germany. How can it be that Sweden, with like a tenth of the population, has so many international, global companies?
Exactly.
So, I think this is one part of the reason for that.
I think it's interesting if you compare to some of the tech companies in the US as well. Perhaps even Tesla could be a good example to compare with here. Because I think it has a bit of both of some German sense, but also some Swedish sense in it. Meaning, for one, Elon, of course, is almost like a dictator there in the Tesla companies. And if he says something, that is what goes, right? Nothing can be said against that.
Top down.
But on the other side, it's extremely democratized is the wrong word, but they have a way where anyone is supposed to really come up with what you should do, and the people that do not contribute to these are a good way to just optimize this water pump in the Tesla engine, then they're going to be reduced in value. So in some sense, it's very, very much a bottom-up approach in Tesla companies, I would say, and in Elon companies. And then you are giving a lot of authority as a small team, like 3-4 people, to make decisions about regulation, about budget, and they have more or less unlimited budget, and they can just do what you do. Better to make a decision and go with it and be wrong than not to make a decision. So in some ways, it's extremely trusted kind of environment, but also almost like a dictatorship in some sense. So I think it's
a autonomy because because what he has created as a culture. I think SpaceX is a good example of this, maybe even better than Tesla. Is this very clear top down that we can move from that direction? It's clear where we're going, but then the very much autonomy in the smaller teams and making that work at the same time, which is very different. I mean, like we are not making that. Sweden are going all the way on the bipolar spectrum in one end, and then we have the other top down hierarchical approach. I don't even think Germany is the worst in the world, and then we have some of these super companies is finding a way to balancing the extremes. Do you agree? I don't know.
I think we should do more research on this because obviously he's found a recipe that works. Every company that Elon owns is operating in the same way, and he's being very secretive about how the way working there works. You can see some videos on it online, and I actually been studying it quite a lot in recent years.
Because it is interesting as a research phenomenon. I mean, like you can think whatever you want about Elon and if he's an idiot or not, or is he crazy or not, but if you just look at the mechanics of how things work and the results, it's quite interesting.
And he's moving in at a speed that, if you just take Germany and I take the automotive company there, Jesus Christ, I'm scared of them. I wish them the best, but it's super tough to compete.
But you can also look at, if you take the automotive industry, it's very interesting, and automotive in electric vehicles and the speed of light that the automotive industry is moving in China, which is also some sort of dictatorship, authoritarian, but goes really hard there. But then how it works in that speed, of course, it's not sent everything with that speed they have in China in terms of things popping up. Of course, it's not controlled top down. It's a direction which is dictatorship, but then it's very fluid. Yeah. This is also very interesting.
Yeah,
and I'm a little astonished that this operating models or structural or things are not discussed more.
Exactly.
Like you said, I think they are so crucial for success or not
They
success.
are.
Exactly.
This is the real design. And this is where I'm sometimes getting a little bit fed up with the big management consultancies, where I don't think they are not deep enough in how the technology works and how the innovation speed works. So they are I don't know. It's something here that I don't think the management consultancy is picking up. I mean, like they're trying to parrot the shit, but they are not really able to repackage this. And I mean, like we have Daniel Lankilde here, who is very, very, he works with test data and how to, annotate data, especially for the autonomy, for self-driving cars and all that kind of stuff. And he's been doing a lot of posts around the European car ecosystem or manufacturing ecosystem versus China, and we need to wake up. There's a big wake up call in some industries here. And I think if you think about what you said now, to research and understand these operating models, when you look at the patterns, what they're doing, I think they're transferable to banking or whatever.
Yeah.
You need to apply them in your context, yada, yada, yada. You need to figure them out. But there are some fundamental pattern shifts here.
Yeah, but at least you need a driving force that wants to achieve a moonshot.
Yeah. That's
Moonshots.
Yeah.
Moonshot.
So, yeah.
Good.
All right.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Okay, time is flying away, and I'd love to just get into a bit about your also other areas of interest, which could be quantum computing, it could be blockchain, could be other areas. But you mentioned that they could be disruptive.
Yeah.
If we start, you can choose, but if we go with quantum computing or blockchain.
Yeah, blockchain is maybe a good example.
Okay.
Because we were looking, I had a team that was scanning extremely what is happening technology-wise mainly, and then we were trying to see what implications this potentially could have on the banking industry and on Handelsbanken, of course. And I think one of the coolest things that happened during this time was when Facebook announced to create
Libra coin, right?
Libra,
Yeah.
this new cryptocurrency, where they created this Libra Foundation in Switzerland. I don't know how much you follow that or not.
I didn't follow so
but
much.
It was also like, I wouldn't say moon, it's not a really moonshot, but the vision was there should be as easy to send money as it is to send a picture in WhatsApp. So,
Exactly.
and that vision is, of course, not, it's not that far-fetched, but that was the driver behind it. And I think and as we assessed at least, they created, and I mean, of course, they have the market power to put another button in WhatsApp, distribution, like I said. They have billions of potential customers who could use it from day one. They had a lot of thinking behind it about financial inclusion. So it was maybe from a Swedish perspective, say we have Swish, what's the problem? But of course, from other parts of the world where this is not possible, financial inclusion, even in the US, sending money is not that easy, as you know.
They still have checks, right?
Exactly. So I think there was a big need and pain point, and they created a model, or they based it on and we talked about blockchain. Then of course you can discuss how much real blockchain was behind. It was a more centralized model, but I would say the whole blockchain hype was driving this, and they created a model where you could exchange your crowns or euros, whatever, into those libras. All this real money, the fiat currencies, as they're called, they would be collected in a Libra consortium or whatever in Switzerland. So they could collect all those money. They had partners from Spotify, Visa, MasterCard. There were 20, 30 partners, because they also realized if this money, whatever you want to call it, is not, you cannot use it because it doesn't make sense. You need to have super
trust for it, blah, blah, blah.
And the whole thing, at least from our perspective, was so well thought through. They had the right partners on board. They had the safety somehow with this Swiss Libra Foundation, that this would have disrupted the financial industry like crazy. And not only the financial industry, but even, and I think this is what at the end of the day stopped it, the power of the US dollar.
Interesting point.
So what happened in the end? So how did this play out? I forget the Libra story. It was a couple of years back.
Yeah. From what we've seen is that Zuckerberg got an invite from the Senate, and they somehow told him, if you don't stop this, we're going to kill your company.
Yeah. Interesting.
Because they were so, and once again, we assessed this. We had actually pretty good big group in the bank, because I can not judge what kind of implications that would have. But we had some people from our finance department, so pretty high, a big bunch of people in this process to assess what this potentially could mean. And I mean, of course, the disruption for the financial sector would have been good, but even for the central banks, because they would have loosened the power over the financial policies of
the inflation and employment rates. And
if Facebook now is deciding and giving Libra, Facebook is deciding
exchange rating Libra. Exactly.
What are the rates for saving Libra?
And did you? So, tell me, when was this playing out? Is it a couple of years back, or when was it? Still playing out.
No. They shut it down. I think it was first it was called Libra, then they changed to the DM. It was they changed the name to DM because this Libra thing was.
Is it 5 years ago or something? More, even more.
6. DM.
DM.
Thank you. And this is and this is also, I mean,
okay, but interesting. But your point then is, blockchain as a currency at least could have a big disruption power potentially, right? And of course we know Bitcoin has worked rather well, right? So in that way, blockchain can reduce the need for the middleman, which could be the banks in this case, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But I just like to ask, okay, so if we can see for currency, it really could be disruptive. But have we seen that much disruption from blockchain as a technology otherwise, outside of currencies?
I would say no. And I think this has a lot to do with the fluctuation of the value. Yeah, that's why Bitcoin, for example, or these other values, whatever. I don't know if you will call them a currency or an asset or whatever, but the fluctuation is so high that you cannot really use them as a payment method. That's why these stable coins came in now during the last years, where a lot of people believe that this is somehow taking the advantages of the stable currencies, but putting them on new payment rails.
But blockchain could be used for so many more things. And now I'm going to, enforce, or talk about my biases here a bit, so please disagree with me. But you could use it just to have some way to, let's say, sign legal documents between companies. And have some other company that doesn't have to be involved. You can simply have the blockchain that, and for some kind of, insurance that it's accurate and it's immutable as the blockchain is, right?
No.
But it doesn't work.
No.
And even in Spotify days, we tried to have a blockchain because we wanted to, in some way, to ensure that artists could trust the numbers of views that you had and how much we should pay to the artists, depending on the users. But it failed also completely because of a simple reason. In that case, we still had Spotify as a middleman, and Spotify had a business model which made it positive for them to be the middleman. And the blockchain would remove that possibility, and simply it destroys the business model of any company that tries to use a blockchain, I would argue. So that's why we have more or less not seen any company finding a positive use as a business model to use blockchain.
Yeah, I
haven't seen one. So I would really
I agree. And I think and there was some other first use cases when the whole thing popped up was in global trade. If you sell something to India, whatever, how many middlemen are in the chain to tick the box that something has happened? And of course, you could put this on a blockchain, then it gets much easier. But I think here the big problem is that these oracles, so the institution who is signing off thing, you still need them. You have somebody has to sign off that something has arrived in China, whatever.
I mean, maybe that's the point, right? You wanted to remove that fundamental mechanism with the blockchain, but as a society, we weren't really ready for that, or it doesn't really fit. It's not the product market fit for how society works. So those institutions, those middlemen, sometimes they're middlemen. Sometimes there are certification bodies, and the argument is, of course, that there's a lot of waste in there, so that's why we want to do it in a different way. But it's always like you end up with, but who is certifying the blockchain?
Exactly.
So it's a little bit like you didn't remove the problem, you just shifted the problem to another power. And is that better? I'm not sure.
If you look at the process, I think the the things that are hindering or slowing down the process will not be removed by a blockchain. They are still there. They just have to sign up on another technology layer. So I think that you would need to redo the whole process. And this is maybe what takes us to the AI thing as well, because just put a little AI in the old processes.
Sugarcoating with blockchain won't work. Sugarcoating with AI won't really do the whole trick either. And this is maybe the big challenge. How to really reform or re-engineer a bank is really, really hard done, because at the same time you are not there to be this, to have failures. We want to reform at the fundamental level, but we can't have failures. That's a really hard equation.
Moving to another technology that failed. No, sorry. Okay, if we move to quantum computing, it's a topic of mine that I'd like to discuss, and I have some strong opinions there. But please, if you would, what do you think about quantum computing?
I think it's also one of the technologies that has a huge potential, that probably has a pretty steep curve in how it is developing. So, I mean, judging quantum computing now compared to 5 years from today, and which probably has one of the most disruptive powers in different perspectives. And that's why we also actually worked with it like 4 or 5 years ago. We as Handelsbanken. Yeah. We took in a lot of people from university.
To try to get a grasp on this.
Yeah, to get and both. And we also do this from 2 angles. The one is to really understand the technology and let some people test and try different solutions that were on the market, everything from IBM, from D-Wave, annealing qubits, and so on. So we asked them to go out and really assess what kind of different technologies are there, what is the path, how are they progressing, and on the other hand, of course, run around in the bank and see what kind of potential problems could we solve with it or not. And then finding people on this business side that were willing to work with us together to understand and assess how that works or not. And it's what we at least realize is that, and we did a lot of test cases, and also we're running our today's problems on these D-Wave annealing qubits, for example, to see are they solving it better or not. And the idea was really to have some test cases ready and test them like all the time against the new technology, because then we would know when is the tipping point.
When is the tipping point to look really into this, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But if you don't prepare for that, if you haven't made your homework there,
as your test cases that you want to benchmark against.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what we did in some of the mostly in risk assessment and capital markets. We had two or three cases that are ready there as a benchmark to test. But one of the biggest questions is, of course, in crypto. What we do with our crypto keys, and how do we make them quantum safe going forward? Because so these are the 2 areas that we were looking into, where I see potential disruption happening.
But this is now such a nuanced topic, and I think we can go into specific quantum techniques that might working well today, and that is good, and then we get into fundamentals of getting quantum computing to scale, and I think this is also where
quantum computing technology is working well today.
No, I'm not the expert, but for me it's a little bit like we are using. I'm trying to paraphrase Sala Franzéns, who are trying to make a case between there are quantum technology or quantum techniques.
You're thinking about quantum mechanics.
Yeah, that's the fundamental of quantum mechanics can be applied in specific use cases and work really well today. That has nothing to do with the field of quantum computing. It's 2 different things. So when I say quantum mechanics or quantum techniques, I mean technology that are quantum mechanical based, but it's not the same as saying that we have a quantum computer. It's 2 different stories. That's what I was trying to convey. I'm not technical enough. Yeah. So take it over.
Oh, it's such a rabbit hole. I can speak for half an hour about this.
But you see what I
was actually a beta user of D-Wave 12 years ago or something. Okay. So I tried out the annealing qubits at the time in a simulated kind of a computer. But No, but you're right, Henrik. So, of course, quantum mechanics is something that exists and works extremely well.
For certain use cases.
We couldn't have any kind of mobile phone, computer, or anything, or even a transistor wouldn't work without the theory behind quantum mechanics that we do have today. So, quantum mechanics is there, very useful, and not very little would work today without the theory behind quantum mechanics. Quantum computers is a different thing, of course. It's the idea of supercomputing entangled qubits that we have. And if anyone claims that there is working quantum computer that provides value better than the classic computer, I would say they are very much wrong. So there is not a single quantum computer today that is more powerful than a classic computer.
Yeah, and just to put that into context, what we talked about, when we talk about quantum crypto, there's these techniques working on quantum mechanics that is quite smart, right? It has nothing to do with quantum computing. It's quantum mechanics used in the crypto context. Am I right?
No, you're wrong. Actually.
Oh, okay. This is how I understood it. Explain it. Because there are quantum techniques in crypto that I think is working. No. You don't think so?
No, I know so. No, but okay. So quantum computers could potentially decrypt messages that RSA or these kind of public key encryption techniques could do if we could have a quantum computer that could scale. There is no quantum mechanics techniques used in crypto technologies today. Right?
But what are the cases where we talk about quantum keys? The quantum keys.
Are you thinking about quantum key distribution?
Yes.
That's actually something we used in my previous place.
This is what I mean. So this is quantum mechanics used in key distribution.
Yes.
That means that this is what I'm pointing at. There's quantum mechanics techniques used for certain specific cases within security, like key distribution.
Yes,
it doesn't that work? That works.
Yes.
You used it.
But it's not an encryption technique. It's a technique to send symmetric keys across long distances in a way that's impossible to intercept.
Yeah. But isn't that what I'm trying to say? There are quantum mechanical techniques that can be applied in certain use cases within how you build your encryption approach. And this particular case was keys. Isn't that part of encryption? Isn't keys part of encryption? I am right, but we are talking about different levels. So if you go back down to in crypto, one of the key aspects is keys. Keys can be done with quantum mechanics. Then I'm right. Don't say I'm wrong. I'm right, but I'm right in a very narrow niche.
We can say he's right, and then we go on, and then we take the discussion later on. Is this okay? Yes.
Oh yeah.
I was just trying to make once again the nuance is the point. As long as we are not nuanced when we're talking about sovereignty, cloud, AI, blah blah blah, or quantum, it's really hard. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I think quantum computing is a very interesting field, and it's fun to see what Google is doing there with the Willow chip that they are building, and Microsoft is doing a lot of progress there as well with the Majorana chip. But it's super hard to scale, and I don't want to go too far into it. I would happy to speak much more about this, but the problem is that we do have working quantum computers, but they are in super small scale. The problem is we have not seen them being able to scale beyond like 1,000 qubits. What we need to have them do anything practically useful, which is like decrypting RSA case of like say 1,000 or 2,000 bits, would need like 1 million physical qubits, and we only have 1,000 of them today. And I would argue that it's exponentially harder to scale as we grow, and we haven't seen it for 40 years them being able to scale.
So you don't expect it to scale pretty in the near future either?
No. But I'm could be wrong.
Hopefully you're wrong, yeah.
But not hopefully, because it would be kind of dangerous. But it's sometimes yes, because quantum computer could open up for a lot of very exciting areas of possibilities, especially in AI. So one of the things I did with D-Wave was actually using quantum computers with machine learning, because you can have the quantum computer doing the training more or less, and you just send the supervised training data to the quantum machine, and then it trains in an exponentially faster way if it would work. So it would be super fun, but also a bit scary, of course, because you could potentially decrypt all the public key encryption techniques that we have today.
But one of the things that we have talked about often on this pod has been like, okay, we put all this effort into understanding quantum computing, and it's a quite complex problem to solve. At the same time, neuromorphic computing seems a little bit closer to the von Neumann and what we're doing today. So, but it's a storytelling that very few is listening to, or it doesn't get as much, hype or media coverage, but it's much more feasible. So if you really want to understand the journey, you kind of need to understand these different approaches and where they fit. And I think that's interesting how little we're talking about neuromorphic compared to quantum.
Yeah, or photonic AI.
Yeah, photonic AI is
a super interesting field. So it's much more realistic.
But I would say, come back to the enterprise angle.
Yeah.
You need to find some use cases where this is applicable.
Yeah.
Because people are usually not that interested in this back-end technology development stuff or whatever.
Really have an enterprise.
You need some people who are looking at that, who understand which tracks are going on and what kind of companies should you work together with.
All these techniques, but what should we use them for becomes the real question.
So I think that the most important part for us, at least, was to find some potential use cases for those technologies so that we can test them and also then prove internally that this is really...
But to scan
making a
invention, to scan techniques that can potentially disrupt the whole bank is part of the game, right?
Exactly.
But then to understand what is just invention and what is actually real that becomes adoptable, this is two different stories, of course.
Yeah, but I mean, the value you only create for the company if it's
Adopted,
exactly. If it makes sense. So I mean, even something in the background and you cannot get it in, or it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to find people, and that's why once again we talked about that before. It's important to have people even on the business side who are interested in that. I think this is a cool thing. They're curious, they want to learn, and then they also help you too. And because if they start scanning the market and see what their other competitors are doing and so on, that really helps you too.
But this is a philosophical or sort of macro tricky question. But in some of the enterprises, especially in a regulated business like industry. One of the challenges I think that we are needing to crack is that you have this technology know-how or AI divide even within the company, that you have some part of the organization that are trying to figure this out, and they have a responsibility to look into this like you had. But at the same time, you have an ongoing business with the core P&L people, so to speak, who are maybe less interested in this because they're just busy surviving and making the business work. So you get this sort of, on the one hand side, the bank is very ambitious, but on the other side, not ambitious enough in trying to interpret what it's doing. What do you think about that? Yeah, this is the dichotomy, again, a challenge.
To be honest, I think maybe you shouldn't go to the top level people in the organization.
No.
Try to find somebody in this organization, it doesn't matter in which hierarchy, who is interested in that stuff, and just help them and understand it, work together with them.
This is back to the community building, the evangelism building, and that is part of the design. If you want to innovate, you need to design for those arenas, maybe.
Time is flying away here, and I would love to move a bit more into more philosophical topics. After one beer and another, it's easier to start to speculate a bit more. Freely, perhaps.
Even more, you mean?
Even more.
Yes. Perhaps we need a quantum computer to do it, but we'll try anyway with our measly human brains to see what we can do. But of course, AI is continuing to improve their functionality, and we're seeing AI being able to not only do more memory, intensive tasks, but actually start to reason a bit and take actions more and more, and start to handle more and more of the cognitive tasks, and perhaps even physical tasks soon. What's your thinking here? What if you were to talk to your kids? You had a 19-year-old, or
and two more, yes.
And two more. What would
older or younger?
Older.
Okay. What would you advise them to do? What do you think about the future? What should we really ask people to go into type of business? Easy question. Speculate.
I think I mean, of course, it's probably need more than one beer to speculate about that, to be honest. But
We can fix that.
I, as a starting point, maybe you could. I was thinking when we were creating ourselves these lists of on one PowerPoint slide where we were listing things that AI is good at and people are good at. And there was on the AI side was usually crunching a lot of data and all this data focused stuff. And on the other side was like creativity, empathy, this human interaction, and so on. And from that perspective, of course, you should advise them to go into a human interaction business. But there was one phrase which I pretty soon started to mistrust in this was about empathy. Because in a lot of discussion, people always said, especially after ChatGPT and so popped up and people were interacting and were astonished how good that works and what kind of stuff is popping up. They said, but empathy is a human thing. And then I started calling some call centers in Sweden, in Germany, whatever, and I didn't feel a lot of empathy from those people.
Exactly.
From the humans, you mean?
From the humans.
Yeah.
Because they gave a shit about my problem. They didn't help me. Obviously they didn't understand me. So we started to think about, is empathy really the thing for humans or not? Because when I'm interacting with ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, at least I get the impression, and this is they're very empathic.
They're designed to listen in and follow you, even.
Yeah, of course, yeah, but
I think psychopathic is different from an empathic,
Yeah.
And I think they actually are a bit empathic.
so, and that's when we actually also started, because I mean, if you're a relationship bank, where the basis is that you have people, you have educated people, you have hired people, you're educating people, you're incentivizing people on being good people to your customers, and always make sure that this customer is leaving this interaction more positively than he came in. So that's a lot about empathy. How do you, even if I would say that the word was not really used in that context, but I would say it's a lot about this empathic way of interacting with people that is one of the key cornerstones of Handelsbanken. And I would say even still, if I call center person from Handelsbanken, they somehow give me the feeling that they care about my problem. So, and then we were looking at the way that chatbots, even from the beginning, were interacting with this, and probably they were trained to do this. But we actually did a lot of. We were going into and say what is actually empathy? Is it just that I hear what you're saying, or that I somehow give you some feedback? I experienced the same stuff. So from a more cognitive understanding for what you're saying and trying to understand your feelings and mirroring maybe your feelings, all the way to would I at the end of the day be willing to act based on what I think your feelings are and your problem is. Which is, I would say, a pretty big bandwidth, because at the lower end, you can say, I feel a pity for you, what happened to you.
But I don't give a shit.
Bad luck, I don't give a shit.
It doesn't change what I'm acting on.
All the way to I leave everything behind and I'm coming to help you. And this is, of course, also, I think it gets even more interesting if we go into agentic now, where chatbots are not only there to help you verbally,
but to act. Can they act with empathy? What does that mean in terms of agency to do another decision or action on a certain thing? It's super interesting.
So and I think there are some proof points, at least I think, where we see that chatbots are obviously perceived as empathic. If you look at some studies, what is ChatGPT used for? It's a lot about life coaching, finding meaning in life, all kinds of stuff. Where if I read these studies, I always feel very sorry for the people using the chatbots in that way because obviously they don't have humans to turn to.
Right.
Which should make us even more concerned about this question. What is empathy really like? Are humans delivering empathy or not? Or are maybe those chatbots better in delivering empathy in the interactions?
Yeah, but and if you think about this now, maybe we can get a much better empathic one-to-one relationship in a unique setting. But if you want to do empathy at scale in a society, and we realize how many lonely people have where they don't get empathy the human way, so their empathy is zero in relation to how they act.
Yeah.
And then empathy at scale becomes a different ball game. It's a very interesting angle on this. So maybe the ideal case is better in human to human, but if for many people there is no human.
There's no alternative. Yeah, and then of course, like you said, I mean, you can go all the way. What do you do with the elderly people that rather go into prison than staying at home because they have some companionship? But also, to be honest, the more maybe easier question: what do you do with your customer service?
Right.
How do you want to put chatbots in your customer service, and how do you make sure that these agents, or whatever you want to call them, are acting in the same empathic way like the people you had before? I would say if you're a company who have very unempathic customer service agents, that's not a big question.
But your spectrum conversation is so important then, because to have empathy that I hear you, but I still rule the action without empathy, is that empathy? Or is that just, versus having empathetic agency where you can act differently based on an empathic feeling in how you look at a loan or a credit or whatever.
Of course. And I mean, there are some studies that show that if you call a call center, you have a problem, and the person at least gives the impression that he cares about what your problem is. He's pretending whatever I did everything I could to solve your problem, but I'm so sorry I couldn't do that. You leave as a customer much more happy than if you have somebody who says, well, that's not my problem. Go somewhere else. I mean, at the end of the day, the result is the same, but that's why I think it's a lot of perception. What is the perceived empathy that you have as a human?
I think I saw some study before, and that was in the medical sector, and it's basically about the patient kind of interactions. And in that case, they were forced to reply by text, like in email form or something, and they compared the perception from the patient from both the humans and the AI, and they basically felt that the empathic kind of response that they got from AI was significantly higher than the human. Now, what you could simply argue is that the humans simply didn't have the time to write this kind of lengthy reply, describing how you feel, you understand them, I really, you do this and understand that. And the humans were pressed on time, and they can't simply write text as fast as AI can, so therefore they weren't really fairly compared, perhaps. But still, it was the result that if you just have the textual domain, the AI were able to reply in a way that made the patients feel happier. And yes, of course, AI is able to do it faster. So, and it can at least phrase itself, in a way that is perceived as being empathic. So then,
but I think this is a very, very good example, because one of the key ideas, I think empathy takes time, cost, money, because empathy means you need to listen and you need to communicate in a way that makes it clear that you feel it. And if the fundamental here is time, it means that they don't have time to be empathic. In this sense now, with the speed of light, AI can be more empathic. I actually think if you look at the hard fundamental of perception, then there is no excuse. It's just a reason why the human they could have done more. They could have been more empathic, but they could have, would have, should have. Their outcome was less empathic because they didn't have the time to be empathic.
And to be honest, I think a lot of they just don't care. If you call a call center agent who sits somewhere in the world, how much does he care about a Swede calling and has a problem with his flight?
And how to lead, because that becomes, they should care, but that requires leadership. Once again, time to be empathic. Time to be empathic by the person doing it, or time to focus on empathy as a leadership steering.
Okay, so what does that mean?
But, yeah.
Exactly, what does it mean? And this is maybe, we were talked about the self-driving cars and stuff like that, and I think there's some similarities, because the target is not to be 100% empathic. I think the target is only to be better than the humans. Like with the cars. I mean, I don't know how many people are dying by car crashes.
It's a lot, at least.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
But obviously we think that's part of life. And so I think the bar of thinking about AI going forward is the bar that AI has to be 100% perfect all the time. That's what a lot of people expect. And they somehow forget that humans are not perfect either. They're not 100% empathic all the time. They're not taking care. They're not paying attention when they're driving car all the time. They're drunk, whatever, all kinds of stuff is happening. But from a self-driving car, you expect that this should be 100% correct.
But does that tell us something on how we regulate or look at these topics in a more nuanced way again? Like the word is differentiated or nuanced, like that.
And responsibility. Because, I mean, in the human, as long as humans do mistakes, it's the human who's responsible, and we have a society or company system to take care of the humans that don't follow the rules.
But coming back to your question here, and okay, we can see that for some tasks, like actually being empathic and even driving a car or writing a reply to customer service case, or even patient diagnosis, an AI potentially is better. What will you advise your kids to do?
Come, you didn't forget that one, yeah?
No, sorry.
My advice would be to stay in an area where, because and this is of course based on my belief that for a while humans still will take a lot of decisions.
Okay.
And like I said before, I don't think that humans are 100% open for fact or data-based decisions. So they need people to sell it to them. So my advice would actually be to be in a position or in a role where you have to face humans.
Okay.
Because I think this need, and especially thinking about the long back call of people who haven't ever used ChatGPT or stuff like that and don't really know what's going on here, and I think this will continue for a long while. And if we as a society don't want to leave those people behind totally, we have to take care of them. And that's why I think there's roles where you somehow have a technological understanding, but are interacting with people to help them take the right decisions. I think this is the spot where there will be a need for a very, very long time.
Yeah, and you can extrapolate on that and think and talk about roles where you need judgment, roles where you need coordination, roles where you need alignment, those to stitch things together.
Because I think taking decisions going forward will get harder and harder.
Yeah, so the decisions is done operationally super fast, but someone needs to apply judgment, and that won't go away. It might take might be more roles that are judgments oriented than task oriented, if you think about it. So how to develop your ability to lean into judgment and be able to train on a certain new topic in order to apply judgment. That's a fundamental trait, I think. Yeah, I like it.
And this human empathy, that's also, I think, because I think we will get delivered a lot of AI empathy going forward.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope that there will be a difference between the AI delivered and the human delivered empathy. And I think this is also one reason why I believe this is a muscle you should train.
But I like the way we got into this, that we almost didn't start with empathy, and then you lead into judgment, because I think judgment is more clear cut, that this will be around empathy. I don't think it's so clear cut. What is AI empathy versus human empathy? We have already good examples here that on the basic task level empathy is too costly, right? So maybe then what is then human empathy that the machine can't do better? Then we need to be nuanced again, right? It's a different style of empathy, which is maybe much more complex. I don't know. I haven't thought about it. I was like, because I think we have cases where the machine empathy is better already.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So thinking even longer ahead, and perhaps we can move to a point for your kids where we could see a very positive future. Perhaps if we think about, AGI actually do happen. I'm not sure. Do you have any thinking if AGI will happen or not? Or what do you think?
I think it's for me personally, it's a very hard term to grasp. What does it really mean to have AGI? Because I think in some areas, I think AI already is superior than humans.
But in general, if you take it literally, like being generally better than humans, like Sam Altman's definition of an AI should be better than an average level human coworker. And that means handling a lot of tasks in a very general sense. I think we're a bit far off, but still, it could happen at some point.
No. Mm.
I mean, for one, you can think about the two extremes here. One, of course, is the super positive one, and super positive could be that we move into a world of abundance, meaning AI have solved all the problems we have. It can cure cancer, it can fix the energy crisis, fix the climate crisis, and basically makes any kind of products and services cost go to zero, meaning you don't really have to work. Your kids then, if they choose to pursue a future in art, gaming, or whatever, they can choose to do so, and that's their choice. That could be a very positive potential future. Or it could be another extreme, which is that the machines will try to kill us all. The Terminator, the Matrix, and we will have, the Iranians and the Russians and the Chinese and perhaps the Americans and the rest of the world sending nukes on us and killing us all. Decided by AI, potentially.
Mm.
And that could be kind of bad. Where do you think we will end up on this kind of spectrum,
I'm actually more afraid that we end up in a third angle, and that is that pretty crazy people will use this technology.
Oh,
that's my perfect angle. Yeah. Okay. Please elaborate.
To do very big harm, or to keep their own power, or to suppress people and so on. So I'm not that afraid that AI somehow will take over and we come to this Terminator future where they all by themselves somehow decide we should get rid of all the people. I'm more afraid of the angle that some people, because I think the potential of doing good or doing harm will increase exponentially going forward.
Because they are empowered by AI.
Yeah, and I think the power of AI, or the potential, what you could do with it, will definitely increase. I think that's what I'm very sure about. The question is only, how will it be used? And based on what I see is happening in the world right now, I'm not too confident that this power will end up in the hands of the right people.
Right.
I think this is there's so many angles on this, because what you're saying is, we've said this before, you're more afraid on the path from artificial narrow intelligence or very powerful AI, but not AGI, being used in the wrong way by the wrong people, and the journey. If we manage to get to AGI, and then maybe the overlords can run us better. So this is the problem. The second dimension of that problem, and I think this is the real threat to be discussed instead of a philosophical threat. Another key challenge of that kind of threat that you're talking about, it doesn't really matter if we have the AI Act or not, because the people who want to do bad,
They don't care.
they don't fucking care at all, right? So it's a different understanding for how we deal with those threats than that we regulate. You can't regulate against that part anyway. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree. And to be honest, I don't think that the AI Act is a hinder at the moment for adoption of AI in companies, because they are so far away from that anyhow.
Yeah.
But I agree. I also think that
The threat is not fixed by regulation anyway.
Super cool. And I hope you can stay on for some more discussions after we turn off the cameras, Stephan. But it's been a true pleasure to have you here. And so many interesting topics. And I'm looking forward now to continue the discussion when we turn off the cameras. But before that, thank you so much for coming here to the AIAW Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and really interesting to see your dynamic here also.
Stephan,
Really cool, yeah.
I guess maybe not for the guest, but it's a good grade from us. 2 hours and 40 minutes. We couldn't shut up talking to you. That's cool, man.
Oh, great.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.